a stunning beauty impossible for men to resist. She, however, prefers the company of women. When things escalate, she takes their lives. Yet, she wasn't born a sadistic predator. Her true identity is a night-stalking vampire. She rules the city's largest underground drug network. A special police task force is determined to eliminate her. However, this mission turns into a suicidal operation. The man, Kim Soo-hyuk, leads the special operations team. A battle-hardened veteran, he faces his toughest mission yet. The target, nicknamed Snow White, is a mysterious woman. But Kim Soo-hyuk finds her identity puzzling. Despite her delicate appearance, she runs a crime empire. The chief warns, don't judge her by appearances. Known for her ruthless and dangerous nature, her real name is Anna Nanayama, also called Snow White. She leads the Seven Mountains gang in Seoul's underworld. Her alias comes from supplying heroin across the city. Recently, she planned a drug party at a hotel. This event provides a prime chance to capture her. The team disguises the raid as a gang dispute. All combatants are restricted to melee weapons. Only the elite were chosen for such harsh conditions. As a seasoned agent, Kim Soo-hyuk is the perfect team leader. He boldly walks into the target's hotel alone, ignoring the surprised stares of her guards. A lone wolf, he only carries a small knife. Without hesitation, he launches a surprise attack. The guards fight back, drawing their blades. But Kim Soo-hyuk, a natural-born killer, remains unfazed. He swiftly disarms one and slashes his throat. Blood sprays as the man collapses. More guards rush in to confront him. Kim Soo-hyuk, knowing their layout, plans accordingly. The operation targets 10 non-combatants and over 20 guards. To eliminate so many enemies, he insists on 3 agents. The chief, skeptical, questions the need for 3. Kim Soo-hyuk explains, there are 3 exits to cover. Blocking them ensures no one escapes. My team is unbeatable, trained killers. Crossing the door, they'll face drugged-out targets. Kim Soo-hyuk prepares for a bloodbath. But opening the door, he finds no wild party. Instead, a gory massacre shocks the team. The floor is littered with corpses, a scene of carnage. Sensing danger, Kim Soo-hyuk orders retreat, but it's too late. A massive chandelier lights up, blinding them. A delicate hand caresses the switch, followed by a sinister laugh. Snow White emerges, surrounded by loyal guards. Her calm demeanor contrasts the chaotic scene. She taunts Kim Soo-hyuk with an air of confidence. Her guards block the exits as the fight begins. Kim Soo-hyuk's team engages in a brutal melee. The veteran agent fights with unparalleled skill. Snow White watches, amused, as the battle unfolds. She comments on Kim Soo-hyuk's impressive combat ability. Her voice drips with condescension. Kim Soo-hyuk ignores her, focused on survival. The guards fall one by one under his blade. Blood pools on the floor as the fight continues. Snow White signals for her elite guard to attack. A towering man steps forward, wielding a katana. He moves with deadly precision, challenging Kim Soo-hyuk. Their blades clash, sparking in the dim light. Kim Soo-hyuk's skill is tested against the superior swordsman. The elite guard gains the upper hand. Kim Soo-hyuk, wounded, refuses to give up. Snow White observes with a cruel smile. Her laughter echoes as Kim Soo-hyuk collapses. The scene fades to black, leaving a haunting silence. Babies. Kim Soo-hyuk was shocked. Who is the prey? Who is the hunter? The woman before him seemed different from the photo. At this moment, Kim Soo-hyuk was still pretending to be calm, thinking of how to defeat her. But his defeat was already certain. From the moment Snow White stood in front of him, he was already dead. Even the woman who had just been with Snow White was now reduced to just a head. At this moment, Kim Soo-hyuk didn't know. He was facing death for the first time in his life. Snow White suddenly threw the head in her hand. It accurately hit a special agent. Quickly and precisely, he caught it, but was shot in the head by a hidden weapon. It turned out that Snow White had shot something from her palm. It pierced the woman's skull and killed her. Seeing a weak woman kill a teammate with a single strike, the man immediately went berserk, ready to avenge his companion. But unsurprisingly, Snow White killed him with a single shot to the head. Countless warm blood and body parts splattered on Kim Soo-hyuk's face, accompanied by Snow White's smug laughter. No matter how many insects struggle, they can't escape the fate of being insects. Kim Soo-hyuk never expected this to be a one-way mission. The woman in front of him was so strong that she had exceeded his understanding. But he couldn't just give up like that. Before he could think further, a deadly hidden weapon shot out from Snow White's fingertips. Up close, Kim Soo-hyuk saw it clearly. It was clearly a tooth. Using skill, he barely dodged the lethal strike. The woman seemed pleased with his response. She summoned several more teeth, preparing to shoot him. But Shounen, with his special agent skills, skillfully avoided all the attacks. He immediately charged forward, ready to kill Snow White. But she unexpectedly pressed his face. With one hand, she easily lifted him. Like tossing a sandbag, she threw Kim Soo-hyuk far away. Lying on the ground, Kim Soo-hyuk was in disbelief at what had happened. However, Snow White was already flying high in the air. With immense force, she slammed down on his legs. The sudden pain drove Kim Soo-hyuk crazy, screaming. But the woman on top of him had her chest bouncing uncontrollably. Helplessly pinned to the ground, he had no strength to resist. Snow White coldly laughed, "Pretty boy. You can't escape my grasp." The man thought he was just having a spring dream. But little did he know, not only had the woman taken his virginity, but she had also bitten off the last of his family's legacy. However, despite her lustful and seductive nature, her true identity was that of a bloodthirsty, brutal vampire. Kim Soo-hyuk, a legendary special agent of the police force, unintentionally began his legendary vampire career. A sharp knife drove deep into his hand, pinning him to the ground. He gritted his teeth, not letting out a single cry. Instead, he questioned the woman named Snow White. "This brutal slaughter, the lost paradise of countless lives. Is this the fun you call seeking pleasure?" Kim Soo-hyuk grew angrier as he spoke. Even in the face of death, he shouted loudly. Suddenly, he thrust his neck out and bit a large chunk of Snow White's soft neck. The sudden bite already hit her artery. Blood started gushing out. And Kim Soo-hyuk, not knowing when, had a sharp piece of glass in his hand. She swiftly and accurately inserted it into Snow White's neck. She widened her eyes. In disbelief, she watched her blood quickly spill down. The next moment, she collapsed onto Kim Soo-hyuk's body. Was it really this easy to win? It was the first time in his life that a woman was lying on Kim Soo-hyuk. Two soft, round objects pressed tightly against his chest. But the brothers who could be killed would never return. Suddenly, Kim Soo-hyuk shuddered. A large mouthful of blood spewed from his mouth. Snow White, who had already been killed, suddenly sat up on him. "Even as a lower-class human, your bite on my neck has left a lasting impression." Before the words were finished, the wound on her neck miraculously healed. This sudden reversal frightened Kim Soo-hyuk so much that his soul nearly left his body. But Snow White had no intention of letting him go. Instead, she squeezed her legs tightly. The intense pressure made Kim Soo-hyuk bleed from below. He tried to get up, but his hands were firmly pinned to the ground, unable to move. Enduring the torment, his eyes bulged, blood pouring from his 7 orifices. With a scream, Kim Soo-hyuk took his last breath. He stopped moving. Snow White, however, felt it was quite a pity. What a fine young man. How could he be so fragile? The useless underlings under Snow White rushed in, shouting, "Boss, are you okay?" A murderous intent flashed in her eyes. "Damn. How could I have any problem?" The first man to charge in had his head exploded on the spot. Everyone thought they were coming to claim the credit, but they ran into the muzzle instead. Snow White just instructed them to deal with the bloody bodies. Next, she would lead all the members back to Japan. There are many ways to die. Some people's final destination is a coffin. Some end up in barrels for their final moments. Kim Soo-hyuk was one of them. The corpses in these barrels would be sealed in cement and permanently sunk to the bottom of the sea. However, the man simply boredly flicked out his cigarette butt, which hit Kim Soo-hyuk's head. And this guy was actually still glaring with his eyes open. With a chilling, long howl, the man stood up naked in the sunset. The underlings had never seen the scene of a dead man coming back to life. But this scene didn't seem like a performance at all. They could only attribute this situation to the corpse's spasms. But the cigarette butt casually extinguished on Kim Soo-hyuk's body, and the scar miraculously healed. Such an unbelievable scene made everyone present stare in shock. After a horrifying howl, Kim Soo-hyuk actually shook his head and stood up. But at this moment, his mind was still floating back to last night's ambush mission. After giving the order to attack, the 3-man team decided to wipe out all the enemies. But unexpectedly, a pair of hands reached from behind, tightly hugging him. Just as he was about to curse, he turned around but was startled by the woman in front of him. The woman was as strong as if she had 3 heads and 6 arms, looking like a female demon lord. Yet, this killer was highly appreciative of Kim Soo-hyuk, even dragging him straight into the darkness. Accompanied by Snow White's eerie laughter, Kim Soo-hyuk suddenly woke up from his sleep. The surroundings were a vast blue ocean. He was floating on the sea. Naked and covered in blood, he lay on the deck. His head throbbed terribly. He couldn't remember what had happened yesterday. The deck was covered in severed limbs and arms. The smell of blood filled the air. What happened here? Why did so many people die? Even Kim Soo-hyuk, who had seen much, was shocked. As he spaced out, a man in black called him awake. The man claimed to be from the police department. He was specially sent to rescue Kim Soo-hyuk. The journey was swift and smooth. Inside the car, Kim Soo-hyuk curiously asked what had happened on the ship. The 2 contacts only vaguely offered sugar-coated answers. Kim Soo-hyuk, seeing this, chose not to ask further. After all, he was mentally and physically exhausted after the night's battle. And in the man's hypnotic voice, his eyelids grew heavier and heavier. Unbeknownst to him, these 2 sneaky men had secretly put on gas masks. With the release of paralyzing nerve gas, Kim Soo-hyuk suddenly felt it hard to breathe. His vision blurred. It turned out these 2 men were here to kidnap him, not police officers. A few minutes later, Kim Soo-hyuk lost consciousness and passed out. Seeing this, the man triumphantly took out his phone. "Boss, we've got the target under control." The man on the other end of the phone was overjoyed. He praised his subordinate greatly. Next, the man planned to transport Kim Soo-hyuk to the lab. The first step would be to dissect him. After hanging up, he couldn't contain his excitement. After 20 years of hard search, "I've finally got you." For the first time, the man savored a woman's delicate body, only to transform into a brutal vampire. The next second, however, he was taken away as an experimental subject to be dissected. But what surprised everyone was, not only did the man not surrender, he seemed possessed by a killing god, causing everyone to bleed on the spot. However, the mastermind behind all this was the detective who had sent him to his death. Yet, this overconfident man didn't know that the experimental subject he thought he was about to get would bring a fatal disaster. Soon, a Mercedes-Benz E300 arrived at the police station's research lab. The excited detective quickly gathered all the top researchers, taking advantage of this rare opportunity. They could conduct many different types of rare experiments, but when the doctor opened the trunk, his pupils suddenly widened. Sweat beads rolled down his face. The trunk was filled with the smell of blood. In it lay the bodies of 2 officers. The man didn't have time to react, when suddenly, a sound of a gun can be heard out of nowhere. The gunshot rang out. A hold with blood appeared on his forehead. His whole body collapsed to the ground like a sandbag. Just behind the car door, countless bullets pierced through the glass, shooting in all directions. The merciless bullets seemed to have eyes, hitting their mark every time, each shot striking the head. After the closest guard blocked a bullet with his head for him, the detective, with his face covered in red and white matter, had yet to regain his senses. In the vast courtyard, only he, the old man, was still breathing. It's over, if this guy can still be considered human. Whether he was born this bold or was just pretending to be calm, the detective did not react. But when he saw the man's face clearly, he immediately turned and fled. He yelled, "All departments, all personnel. Kill this damn kid!" However, Kim Soo-hyuk was no longer the person he once was. Now, noble vampire blood flowed through his veins. In an instant, dozens of people with knives rushed at him. The leader was unusually brave, but he was shot through the top of his head by Kim Soo-hyuk. Then, from a distance of 10 meters, he accurately shot the other man in the head. If they could defend against the front, they were hit from the side. An agent with a knife secretly launched an attack from the right, but was suddenly grabbed by Kim Soo-hyuk's wrist. He then broke the agent's elbow with a single shot. Then, a 9mm bullet sent him to meet the King of Hell. However, the fearless soldiers continued to charge at him. But no matter how brave they were, it didn't matter. Because Kim Soo-hyuk had evolved into something they could never reach. He remained calm, with his left hand snatching a man's dagger, while his right hand easily blew another's head off. Whether it was physical skills or intellect, Kim Soo-hyuk and they were simply 2 different species. After dealing with the man lying on the ground with a single strike, his mind suddenly went blank. It felt like there was some strange premonition. A flying bullet flipped half of his skull. Kim Soo-hyuk fell to the ground like a kite with a broken string. His brain matter scattered everywhere. The 2 agents who succeeded did not let their guard down. After confirming his death, they immediately scanned their surroundings for any threats. But to their surprise, the already deceased Kim Soo-hyuk secretly raised his gun behind them. With an incredible angle, he jumped into the air. Several people were shot in the head and fell. The agents who had just shot him were frightened and lost their wits. Clearly, they had just shot him in the head. Why would he revive? However, reality did not allow them to think too much. Because the gun in their hands was knocked away by Kim Soo-hyuk with his bare hands. The reason he had not been killed was simply because Kim Soo-hyuk wanted to use someone as a bullet shield. But the most detestable detective had already run far away. Facing the man who would give him orders, Kim Soo-hyuk's mind raced, and anger surged from his heart. The country he had fought and risked his life for with his comrades had long prepared to sacrifice their names for their benefit. Kim Soo-hyuk smiled wickedly. With a light twist of his hand, he snapped the man's throat. Blood splattered into his eyes. He didn't even blink. The detective never expected that the pawn he had once abandoned would turn into such a ruthless butcher. From dying by Snow White, to being deceived as an experimental subject in a car, to just being shot in the head, Kim Soo-hyuk had been killed 3 times. Yet he kept coming back to life, and his abilities grew stronger each time. But as a spy, his instinct was to gather intelligence and eliminate enemies. As Kim Soo-hyuk closed in step by step, the detective was scared out of his wits. Not a word was wasted. Dao Jia expressed his willingness to reveal all secrets and be promoted for him. But Kim Soo-hyuk silently raised the gun in his hand. He pulled the trigger and shot through his thigh. The sudden pain made the detective scream loudly. Was the man before him a devil from hell or a mad butcher? However, Kim Soo-hyuk opened his mouth and asked him, "What did you do to me?" The detective, however, hesitated and couldn't speak a word. Kim Soo-hyuk, not wanting to hear nonsense, raised his hand and fired a bullet through the other leg. "If you want to live, stop babbling and focus on what matters." However, the truth of the incident was beyond his expectations. The woman had a strange disease since childhood. Whenever she saw a man, she would first assault and then kill him. But she wasn't a sex-addicted woman. She was the vampire queen who ruled the underworld. Even top-tier agents with extraordinary skills had fallen under her spell. But now, having obtained immortality, Quan Xiaolin, was he truly willing to fall into the Blood Clan's demonic path? Kim Soo-hyuk shot through both of the detective's good legs. Now, this guy could only stand using his third leg. All of this was just to make him reveal the secrets of his body quickly. The detective finally spoke. Once you are killed, you will immediately be reborn. The injuries you sustained will heal quickly. And this ability, Anna's subordinates also possess it. With this unique technology, Anna has already reached the peak of the Japanese underworld. And this was also the technology the detective had been pursuing. Kim Soo-hyuk finally understood why they had repeatedly sent agents to their deaths. However, the ordinary agents sent had been killed one after another. After discussion, the police decided to send the elite of the elite agents. This was the reason why Kim Soo-hyuk was chosen as the special operations team leader. And Anna brought this unbelievable technology to South Korea. Even the most dangerous missions, there was no need to worry about getting injured. The once high-ranking detective now bowed his head and worshipped the discarded pawn, calling himself a hero. But just as he attempted to make a heart gesture, Kim Soo-hyuk shot a bullet through his shoulder blade. He couldn't understand why, even after telling the truth, he was still being harmed. What made Kim Soo-hyuk angry was that he kept calling himself a hero, yet still tried to turn him into an experimental subject. The more people that woman killed, the more experimental data she would get. These agents were sacrificed by the greed of the government. Even if there was a shred of pity, his colleagues wouldn't have died in vain. The detective knew his life was nearly over. Dao Jia couldn't blame himself. The gangsters were people too. Didn't you say you wouldn't lose to anyone? The agents who died, they were merely sacrificing themselves for the country. I even awarded them medals. Kim Soo-hyuk couldn't listen any longer. He kicked the old detective's glasses off. Facing death, still no apology. Always making excuses for yourself. Under the moonlight, Kim Soo-hyuk slowly drew a blade from his chest. A long night awaits, feel their fear. The detective, who had just been threatening, now finally knew fear. But it was too late. The sharp blade had already stabbed towards his head. Just as quickly as words can be spoken, a flash of light appeared. Kim Soo-hyuk's knife was knocked to the ground. It turned out the reinforcements had already surrounded them. The detective, at this time, actually had the time to blame his subordinates. These officers weren't ordinary soldiers. They were armed elite special forces, fully trained with automatic weapons. Even Kim Soo-hyuk knew he couldn't face them head-on. But now, with nothing to take cover behind, where could he find protection? Yet, the special forces loaded their guns. They formed positions and began shooting. The detective, recognizing the situation, lay on the ground pretending to be dead. During the chaos, he even wet himself. Quan Xiaosien was hit by dozens of bullets, being shot into a sieve. He lay in a pool of blood, motionless. The detective regained his spirit at this point, shouting, "Let's see you act all high and mighty now. Done for, huh? Tie him up properly, and let him provide blood for our research. Ha ha." But at this moment, Kim Soo-hyuk did not get up as he had imagined. Was he really dead? It seems that whether it's the underworld or the special forces, no one can overcome the power of a bullet. Suddenly, on the beam in front of the detective chief, a strange head popped out. A strange female voice asked, "Hey, is it Kim Soo-hyuk?" Now it was the detective chief's turn to be surprised. "Pink-haired freak? What is this?" The woman slowly said, "I'm Ayaka, the leader of Team 7, the gang you just mentioned." The detective chief immediately ordered the Tiger team to strike. However, the woman's speed was unbelievably fast. In an instant, she landed behind all the team members. They only had time to turn around. Heads and limbs flew into the air with the flash of the blade. Ayaka slaughtered them as easily as chopping vegetables. Facing the simultaneous fire from several MP5 submachine guns, Ayaka fearlessly charged straight into the barrage. With her swordplay in both hands, she created an incredible sword shadow, deflecting all the bullets. Within 10 steps, a sword is faster than a gun. Ayaka never needs a second strike to kill. Team members' heads flew around with her sword dance. The police department's standard-issue bulletproof vests couldn't defend against the sharp sword. Meanwhile, up high, a sniper with a night vision scope had already locked onto her head. The shooter, using the gap created by a teammate's death, aimed and fired at Ayaka. It seemed her pink hair would be drenched in blood. The bullet was almost upon her, but Ayaka quickly sensed the sound of the wind cutting through the air. She suddenly shifted all her strength and turned around. With her sword's edge, she split the bullet in half. The Special Forces team members were stunned by this move. What kind of monster is this? Bullets had no effect on her at all. So what was the point of the operation? But there was no time to think. The pink-haired Reaper had already arrived in front of them. They didn't even get a chance to glimpse her cleavage before a sword pierced their throats. Against absolute speed and power, the annihilation of the elite tiger team was only a matter of time. With the last head hitting the ground heavily, the entire reinforcement team had been wiped out. Under the moonlight, Ayaka walked toward the detective chief with a deadly pace. The righteous reaper didn't say much, only swinging her sword simply, and cleaving this filthy man's head in half. After cleaning up the scene, she once again tried to wake up the already dead Kim Soo-hyuk. As expected, this fool was still alive. Instead, with a grunt, she struggled and climbed up. Ayaka got straight to the point. She mentioned she was sent by Anna to bring Kim Soo-hyuk into the organization. However, Kim Soo-hyuk wasn't someone who feared the strong and bullied the weak. Confronted with death, he fearlessly cursed, "Get lost, you scoundrel." Ayaka seemed to have anticipated his reaction. No matter the method, she was determined to bring Kim Soo-hyuk before Lady Anna. A man decapitated the woman just because her chest was too large. But the next moment, she actually put her head back on. She even swiftly severed the man's arm. This was because both their bodies contained the noble blood of vampires. Any injury would instantly heal upon death. However, vampires weren't invincible in this city. Vampire hunters armed with pure silver weapons would purify their tortured souls. Ayaka's mission was to bring Kim Soo-hyuk back. If he refused, she would just bring back his head. The long swords collided heavily. The two immediately began a fierce life-or-death struggle. Ayaka kept praising Kim Soo-hyuk's exceptional abilities, but her sword repeatedly pierced his abdomen. His blood was nearly drained. Kim Soo-hyuk knew that prolonging this battle was dangerous, and if it continued, he would definitely lose. To survive, he had to take drastic measures. When Ayaka launched another fast attack, Kim Soo-hyuk deliberately blocked her sword with one hand, but that exposed his body. Ayaka quickly spotted the opening and thrust her sword into Kim Soo-hyuk's abdomen, blood spraying. But what she didn't know was that this was a trap Kim Soo-hyuk had been planning. He suddenly grabbed her hand tightly. "Now you can't escape, you wicked person." Ayaka was shocked, realizing it was bad. But there was no time to regret. Her hand was firmly grasped by Kim Soo-hyuk. The only choice left was to fight to the death. The sword slashed across Ayaka's neck, while she also struck Kim Soo-hyuk heavily. The two collapsed heavily to the ground. But in the distance, it seemed a pink head was rolling. Kim Soo-hyuk lay on the ground, his breath fading, his abdomen torn open. His blood flowed out. The life in him was extinguished. Last time, due to hesitating, only Anna's artery was pierced, leading to a counterattack. This time, he sacrificed his own arm, but successfully decapitated Ayaka. This time, victory was surely his. Losing too much blood, Kim Soo-hyuk began to lose consciousness. But through the fog, he saw someone seemingly standing in front of him, holding something in their hand. Already unconscious, he shivered. Suddenly, he became fully awake. In the moonlight, a headless body stood silently in front of him, holding Ayaka's head in their hand. What was even more terrifying, the person placed the head back onto the neck, slowly, positioning it back. The woman's veins bulged, as if exerting all her strength. There was a sound of cracking. Ayaka actually put her head back in place, as if it were just a part to be reattached. Kim Soo-hyuk, now fully awake, broke into a cold sweat, but his body couldn't move an inch. Ayaka drove the sword into his body again, fixing him firmly to the ground. She mocked him, saying, "You've done excellently. When you open your eyes again, you'll see Lady Anna." She applied some force. Kim Soo-hyuk's eyes widened in pain. His blood was almost drained. Kim Soo-hyuk's consciousness began to fade. A proud Ayaka puffed up her chest. But at this moment, the eastern sky began to lighten. To avoid lingering danger, they had to return before the sun rose. Just as Ayaka was about to pull her sword out, Kim Soo-hyuk's body actually staggered and stood up. This pretty boy just wouldn't give up. Truly a tough guy. After suffering such severe injuries, he could still fight. He even launched an attack on Ayaka. But all his struggles were in vain. The woman met his charge with her sword, and with a single strike, she severed his right arm completely. Confident and proud, she started spouting trash talk. When Kim Soo-hyuk's left fist landed a hook, it nearly crushed her chest. It seemed this opponent was not to be underestimated. Kim Soo-hyuk's severed right arm mysteriously regenerated. Gathering into claws, it lunged toward Ayaka. The powerful impact left deep blood marks on her arm. With Kim Soo-hyuk, who mastered super speed regeneration, his explosive power was also on a whole other level. Up close, he wanted to bite down on her chest, but Ayaka's arm blocked him. Instead, he bit down hard. No matter how Ayaka stabbed him with her high-speed sword dance, Kim Soo-hyuk bit down fiercely, not letting go. The nerve toxin injected into him stimulated her. Ayaka's veins shook violently, her blood drained rapidly. Proud Ayaka realized this time was a losing battle. She had no choice but to pull out her sword and swing it, then leaped high into the air to create distance. However, this time, she paid with blood. She even severed her own arm. just to escape the situation. But blinded by rage, Kim Soo-hyuk still bit down on her severed arm. That arm had turned a terrifying grayish white. It seemed not only was her blood drained, but it had also been carbonized by the toxin. Ayaka had never seen such a terrifying sight in a vampire. Kim Soo-hyuk was not just in a berserk state. He seemed to have evolved into a bloodthirsty beast, extremely difficult to deal with. At this moment, several bullets suddenly hit him, which knocked Kim Soo-hyuk down. Seeing her opponent being hit, Ayaka reacted quickly, immediately turning her one-handed sword into a dance, deflecting the continued assault from the submachine gun. But bullets were firearms. A 9mm bullet passed through the sword and hit her shoulder. However, the injury, which should have healed quickly, continued to burn and rot. What? Is this Silver Bullet? A group of emotionless men in black quickly entered, surrounding Ayaka in an instant. Facing the rising sun, a short-haired woman with a sword on her back walked slowly. Guilty souls, we have come to purify you. On the first day a man became a vampire. He was tortured to the brink of death by a woman. Not only was he trampled underfoot by the king, but nearly had his testicles cut off with a knife. Because the woman was a vampire hunter by profession, and could easily kill the eternal vampires with a simple strike. However, the vampire man was not afraid of the sunlight. He even seduced the woman who wanted to kill him, having a one-night affair. The short-haired woman, upon first meeting, was ready to send the two vampires to the Father in heaven. Ayaka had no room for negotiation, because the woman saw them as livestock to be slaughtered. At the command, all the team members fired in unison. The silver bullets caused severe damage to the regenerating vampire bodies. Since the gunmen aimed at their legs, both of them lost the ability to move after being shot. They couldn't even stand. The woman saw that the situation was under control, and ordered her subordinates to burn Kim Soo-hyuk alive. The group put away their handguns, lowered their backpacks. Each of them took out a sniper rifle and aimed at Kim Soo-hyuk. Fire! But what shot out were harpoons with steel ropes. Several harpoons pierced through Kim Soo-hyuk's body, but this did not cause him any harm. The group pulled the triggers. Instantly, high-energy currents began to burn Kim Soo-hyuk's body. Ayaka, waiting on the ground, noticed another terrifying crisis. The first ray of sunlight of the morning was about to shine upon the earth. As the sunlight reached, her skin and hair began to burn intensely. Screaming in painful agony, the short-haired woman sneered. Does it hurt that much? The pain of hellfire is at least twice as intense as sunlight. You're really overreacting. Facing the relentless mockery, Ayaka could only lie on the ground like a dog. For the first time, she felt that pure-blooded humans were truly disgusting. Damn you. Before she could finish the third word, the woman's first strike came. She stepped on Ayaka's wrist, which was about to rise to attack, then forcefully crushed the arm with her foot, rendering her unable to hold the sword. Ayaka screamed in agony. The last time she had lost control like this was during her first time. Now, even with strength, she couldn't drag her two broken legs to escape. The short-haired woman shouted, "Today, I'll turn you two into ash." But she suddenly stopped and turned to look in another direction. Something unbelievable happened. Sure enough, the mighty Kim Soo-hyuk, under the burning of the high-voltage electricity, still remained standing, unyielding. Despite the fierce electricity burning his body, he continued to defy the odds. However, she was not only surprised by this. The sun had already risen, and under the intense sunlight, as a vampire, he surprisingly wasn't harmed at all. In the moment when the woman was stunned, Ayaka, who had been waiting to die helplessly, realized this was the perfect opportunity to escape. She used the last of her stored blood potential. She quickly rushed towards the shadows, moving both her hands and feet. Even the skilled vampire hunter couldn't keep up with her speed. Just as the woman was considering whether to pursue, a cry of pain and rage came from her team. They had never dealt with such a troublesome monster. No matter how many bullets they shot, Kim Soo-hyuk could immediately recover. Then, he would launch a deadly attack on the shooters. Seeing the man's eyeballs about to be gouged out, a flash of white light suddenly appeared, severing one of Kim Soo-hyuk's arms. The woman calmly said, "All personnel, retreat immediately." The rookie Kim Soo-hyuk, who had once been helpless, now seemed like a completely different person. The danger level had risen significantly. The woman slashed her sword diagonally, intending to cut him in two. However, Kim Soo-hyuk merely blocked the sharp sword with his wrist. At the same time, he actually manipulated his other severed hand to rapidly regenerate and grow a new one, with such speed that there was no time to react. He suddenly swung a punch at the woman. When his fist was just 0.01 millimeters away from her defense, the woman swiftly dodged, agilely avoiding the heavy punch. But a wicked smile appeared on the woman's lips. "Thank God. I didn't choose to kill him first. This treasure is just too much fun." Before her words could finish, she swung her fist towards Kim Soo-hyuk. The punch landed squarely, right on his most vulnerable spot. With a loud crash, the air was filled with the scent of the man's descendants. But what the woman couldn't understand was why such an outstanding warrior had been hiding his combat abilities all along. However, as the smoke cleared, what she saw was not what she had expected. Kim Soo-hyuk was not knocked down, as she had imagined. Instead, he was still biting a gunman's neck, continuously sucking blood. He could actually fight while constantly replenishing his strength by sucking blood. As the blood from the body was completely drained, it was violently thrown to the ground. After being well-fed, Kim Soo-hyuk seemed like a completely different person. Not only had all his wounds healed, but his basic combat abilities had nearly doubled. The woman clenched her fists. Vampires like this are too dangerous. No matter what, he must be killed here today. She stomped her foot on the ground, invoking the enchanted holy sword in the name of the Father, swearing she would never let the vampire in front of her escape today. But unexpectedly, Kim Soo-hyuk collapsed to the ground, not getting up again. The sudden change left the woman stunned. "I've brought out my trump card, and yet you fail so miserably?" 1 hour later, Kim Soo-hyuk slowly opened his heavy eyelids. "Captain Kim Soo-hyuk, wake up! Who is this?" Such a familiar voice. When he saw the person's face, Kim Soo-hyuk couldn't help but widen his surprised eyes. The person in front of him was none other than his direct superior, Commander Lee Ka-chong. And the woman who had just chopped him into pieces was also standing nearby. It seemed they were on the same side. But Kim Soo-hyuk suddenly realized he was tied to a telephone pole. What does this mean? At this moment, the woman's voice drifted over. "Captain Kim Soo-hyuk, after a comprehensive evaluation of your actions, we had to make the following decision. We must kill you, because you are an extremely dangerous vampire." "I'm a vampire? What?" Kim Soo-hyuk was utterly stunned. The woman had only slept with a man, yet she had her limbs severed by her jealous elder sister and made into a human recording. However, Anna merely shared a passionate kiss with her, and the lost limbs miraculously regenerated. Only because Anna possessed the supreme vampire bloodline. All vampires are only fit to be her sex slaves, but the man Anna most longed to possess, Kim Soo-hyuk, not only did not fall at her feet, but instead joined the feared Hunter Corps. After capturing Kim Soo-hyuk, the short-haired woman determined that he was a vampire who must be eliminated. But not only did he refuse to believe in the existence of vampires, he even laughed out loud, mocking her for her feudal superstitions. The woman faced his disdain, but simply lifted his chin, then extended her middle finger, which she often used each night. She gently bit the tip of her finger, and a drop of fresh blood fell onto Kim Soo-hyuk's face. It caused an unusual ripple to spread. His blood surged. His pupils expanded several times and turned blood red. His body, bound by shackles, trembled uncontrollably. His muscles tensed, veins bulging. Even his fangs were exposed. And the cause of all this was a single drop of blood from the woman's fingertip. "I want to drink that sweet blood," a voice kept whispering to him. The next second, he suddenly became alert. "What have I done? How did this happen?" As the woman had said, he had become a vampire with a strong thirst for blood. The evidence was undeniable. And with the facts laid out before him, Kim Soo-hyuk couldn't deny it anymore. Even Director Zhang, who had always trusted him, had to accept the reality. It turned out Director Zhang had already watched the full video of Kim Soo-hyuk's rampage on the ship, and the dismembered corpses scattered throughout the ship were his own handiwork. He didn't even know who Anna was, yet dared to take on such a dangerous task. It was truly ignorance to a terrifying degree. Unwilling to believe it, Kim Soo-hyuk still argued. "How do you know Anna is a vampire? Wouldn't the International Criminal Police Organization know?" The woman sneered contemptuously. "Of course, I know what she is. Killing vampires has always been the sole goal of our Vendy Win team. Originally, according to the rules, she didn't need to waste time talking with Kim Soo-hyuk. She could have just killed him outright. But now, the woman decided to give him a chance for rebirth, to fight alongside her. Kim Soo-hyuk couldn't believe his ears. Just a moment ago, they were fighting until his head was bloodied. And now they were supposed to join forces? The woman, however, was open and unashamed. "Since we have a common enemy, why not combine our strengths? After all, our only goal is to kill Anna." Anna's immense power had already swallowed up Korea's largest drug trafficking group, and even the strongest local gang had been absorbed into her faction. But what enraged her the most was, why couldn't they even catch a small, faceless man? But Ayaka had already had her limbs chopped off, leaving only her head and a pair of breasts, while the rest of her body was scattered in pieces on the ground. Anna regretted giving her this task. Her tone seemed somewhat helpless. The next second, however, she tore off Ayaka's mask, and instead gave her a passionate kiss. The woman's pupils instantly widened, filled with an unbelievable blood-red color. Her severed limbs and body rapidly regenerated, perfectly as if she had never been harmed. Naked, she crawled in front of Anna like a dog, kneeling in submission. This was her last chance, to bring that woman to Anna. This mission must not fail, only success is allowed. Anna had sent a woman to secretly watch her every move, and if any suspicious activity from Ayaka was noticed, the woman would take action to completely erase her. The next morning in Seoul, the streets were sparsely populated and lazy, but a Mercedes E300 sped by like lightning, and inside it was Kim Soo-hyuk. Unconsciously, he had joined the Venti Wind team. After all, he had no choice. If it was a matter of life or death, no one would choose to be killed as a vampire. After all, joining the Venti Wind team was also to kill Anna. But because the agent Kim Soo-hyuk had killed before was from the director's faction, the police had no choice but to list him as a target as well. However, even now, Kim Soo-hyuk still found it hard to accept that he had become a vampire. After all, he had offended many factions, and if the woman hadn't protected him, he might have already been killed. As a team, working together to take revenge on Anna was the best choice. Although the woman still couldn't fully trust him. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. This saying is always true. Moreover, the woman seemed to have prepared a better way to keep him under control. Soon, they arrived at the team's base, codenamed Secret Room. It was actually a large cathedral, and because of that, the existence of the secret room was more natural, making it harder for enemy forces to detect. While Kim Soo-hyuk was looking around at his new home, the driver suddenly stepped on the gas and turned in another direction. The cathedral was blessed by divine power, possessing a barrier that could repel evil spirits. Therefore, as a vampire, Kim Soo-hyuk could not enter the secret room. Since he had already become a member of the team, his only goal was to hunt down Anna. Due to Kim Soo-hyuk's special situation, the woman planned to let him manage himself. In other words, she intended for Kim Soo-hyuk to live with her. Clearly, she was a delicate goddess that countless men dreamed of. Yet she only had eyes for Kim Soo-hyuk. She even willingly offered her alluring body to serve him. This was because Kim Soo-hyuk was an extremely rare abnormal vampire, not only possessing rapid regeneration abilities but also being able to act during the day. And their shared goal in fighting side by side was to eliminate the vampire leader who dominated South Korea, Snow White Anna. When Kim Soo-hyuk and the woman first met, they went straight to a hotel. And for the coming period, they would eat and live together. How terrifying. This was the exclusive hotel of the Venti Wind squad, which would not record any personal information. The woman might have been hot, as she immediately undressed down to only a small vest. Her sculpted body under yoga pants was subtly visible. The mysterious area between her legs seemed to beckon to others. With her feet in the air, she revealed a hint of mischief. Her pair of jade-like breasts bounced playfully. She introduced herself as Mirror. Of course, this was just a code name. However, she had long heard of Kim Soo-hyuk's great fame. Like the two sides of a coin, they were able to calmly chat after just an hour. What Kim Soo-hyuk cared most about was the so-called vampires. Mirror smiled slightly. It seemed that this man had gradually accepted his situation. Vampires truly existed in this world. Like the legends, they lived by consuming human blood. Moreover, they possessed physical strength far beyond ordinary humans and eternal life. Most vampires descended from the original bloodline, but Anna was the only survivor in 1,000 years. Recalling the time when he bit off Anna's neck, was it then that he accidentally absorbed the blood of the origin ancestor? But how did the Venti Wind squad kill them? Normally, vampires would burn to death in the sunlight. They would soon combust and die under direct sunlight. Ayaka died for that reason previously. However, Kim Soo-hyuk could move freely under sunlight. This might be why Anna paid special attention to him. Since he had this unique advantage, the squad could use Kim Soo-hyuk to face Anna's group directly. The most important thing right now was to first enhance Kim Soo-hyuk's combat power. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be able to approach Anna. The woman was confident that Kim Soo-hyuk had already been convinced by her. But who knew this guy was not only strong, but also claimed that the woman was actually afraid of him. Without the moonlight's restraint, I will become a demon that makes people tremble in fear. But for Mirror, killing him was also a regrettable last resort. Therefore, you keep me by your side under the excuse of a common enemy, and can dispose of me whenever needed. This way, it's a win-win situation. The woman revealed a wicked smile. This man's calm demeanor surprised her. No matter what, as a vampire, Mirror still had to remain cautious of him. The most important task now was to quickly make Kim Soo-hyuk stronger, to have the power to face Anna head-on. Although Kim Soo-hyuk had died several times, his hatred had not been subdued at all. As long as there was an opportunity, he would give up everything and kill Anna at any cost. The woman was somewhat surprised by his frankness. Knowing she was using him, he still chose to follow her. This man's only goal was revenge. It showed how deep his hatred was. Interesting, so interesting. Let's see how I tame you, my little wolf. It's meal time, come bite my neck. Mirror took off her clothes. The smooth, white cleavage and the artery on her neck looked enticing. Kim Soo-hyuk was confused. Why do you want me to do this? I've never even touched a woman in my life. Ordinary vampires slow down if they lack blood. But Kim Soo-hyuk automatically seeks out blood sources frantically. The most important point was, he doesn't seem to kill innocent people. He only stops once he has taken the necessary amount of blood. Looking at the woman's smooth, white neck, he couldn't help but swallow. He couldn't suppress the desire in his heart. Kim Soo-hyuk still stood up, but the woman seemed impatient. Her small breasts trembled slightly. Kim Soo-hyuk bit his lip. Should he really go down this irreversible path? But the next second, the primal desire from the ancestor blood made him bite down on the girl's artery. The woman's pupils shook and turned a terrifying blood red. Her breathing became increasingly rapid and intense. "You little bastard, you hurt me. Don't stop, go deeper." But Kim Soo-hyuk's biting gradually turned into kissing. His hands also seemed to become restless. He gradually pressed down on the woman's alluring breasts. However, Kim Soo-hyuk's gaze became sharp and fierce. "I'm going to drain this woman's blood." The sound of Anna's laughter seemed to echo in his ears. "You really are different." Enthralled by the blood, he suddenly snapped back to reality. He pushed the woman away forcefully, but accidentally pushed against her chest. The woman, lying on the bed, was still breathing heavily, the delicate cleavage slightly visible, the secret region between her legs fully exposed. Was this bloodthirsty urge the uncontrollable impulse of a vampire? Mirror, however, acted as if nothing had happened. She quickly sat up, then grabbed the blanket and crawled into the bed. "Hurry up and sleep. I have to get up early tomorrow to train you. Don't touch me." Kim Soo-hyuk, drenched in sweat, was at a loss. Did he really have to repeat this blood-sucking routine every day? Even though his body had turned into a vampire, he would never give up on taking revenge on Anna, because his heart still belonged to humanity. "Rest in peace, my brothers. I'm proud of you. I'll send that filthy bitch to hell and let you play with her." Kim Soo-hyuk thought of this, and then unraveled his mental knot. He pulled the blanket and lay down to rest. And so, the lone man and woman slept in the same bed for the first time. After a few minutes, the faint sound of snoring came from the man, but Mira's face flushed unusually. For some reason, she felt her heart pounding. The surrounding atmosphere also gradually became warm and pleasant. That man, is he really under the same blanket as me? Such a strange feeling of shame. The woman never imagined in her dreams that after killing a vampire, he would rest his head on her white chest and drink from her, and even took away her most precious virginity. This was because the man was originally a bloodthirsty elite agent, but by accident absorbed the blood of the progenitor vampire. After joining the Vantafeng squad, he began a bloody revenge. Not 5 minutes after lying down, Kim Soo-hyuk's snoring could be heard, but the woman next to him hadn't fallen asleep. Instead, she blushed, feeling strangely flustered. Thinking about that man sleeping in the same bed with me. Why is my heart racing so much? Can he see that there's an empty bed in that room? Didn't I just say there's an empty bed in the room? But now this guy chooses to sleep with me? As a believer, sleeping in the same bed with a man is too rude, right? He looks like a righteous gentleman. I never expected this guy to secretly have ulterior motives. He just finished eating someone's flesh, and now he wants to enter someone's body? No way. However, at this moment, Kim Soo-hyuk couldn't hear her inner monologue. He was already sound asleep. Instead, it was Mira herself, whose face burned with desire. She turned over, deciding to drive away her chaotic thoughts and sleep well. She took a deep breath, adjusting her breathing, her hands placed together on her chest in prayer, and began silently praying to the Father. Her breathing gradually calmed down. Meanwhile, Kim Soo-hyuk slept peacefully, simply turning over, but his hands suddenly and mischievously landed on the woman's small abdomen, then slid under her clothes, rubbing back and forth. Mira's face instantly turned bright red. Then came a loud slap. The next day, the devilish training for Kim Soo-hyuk was about to begin. In the special training room used by the Vantafeng squad, Kim Soo-hyuk's first training session began. His instructor was Mirror, who had just slept with him last night. However, because of his restless hand in his sleep, he had a 5-finger mark on his face. Back to the point. Vampires are nearly invincible against ordinary weapons, but they fear sunlight, and have another enemy. That's silver. As soon as a vampire touches silver, their skin will burn violently. Using silver weapons and bullets can cause fatal injuries to most vampires. Recalling that Ayaka who picked up his head, Kim Soo-hyuk suddenly understood. But he asked Mira's real name at the wrong time, apologizing for what happened last night. However, the woman was already furious upon hearing this. The man kept blabbering, and Mira's fist was already in front of him. With a full force, she hit Kim Soo-hyuk's face. "Who told you to touch me?" But he remained calm, firmly standing his ground and blocking the attack. Mirror, however, couldn't do anything. After all, they were comrades in the same trench now. They had to be stronger than the enemy. But Kim Soo-hyuk was still too weak. He had to first accumulate experience through non-combat training. After a period of hard training, Kim Soo-hyuk would have a chance to become a top-secret agent, and as a vampire, keep sucking human blood, to transform it into his own base strength. Before he could snap back to his senses, Mira's fist and her large breasts were already close. Kim Soo-hyuk blocked with his hands, but that wasn't enough. He once thought he had reached the peak of human abilities. But at this moment, he couldn't do anything to this seemingly weak woman. He couldn't even touch a single strand of her hair. Was he really as laughable as a frog at the bottom of a well? Mirror landed a punch, shattering him. But she would never stop there. Half an hour later, Kim Soo-hyuk, weakened, spat out a mouthful of blood. Yet, he didn't complain. He simply wiped the blood with his foot, then raised his fist again and charged toward Mirror. "I will fight to the end." But the woman smiled slightly, silently nodding at his resilience. The man before her was gradually becoming the one chosen. But so far, it's still far from enough. At this moment, one of the subordinates suddenly and inappropriately pushed open the door and reported loudly. The reckless action greatly surprised the Mirror. According to the news brought by the subordinate, the situation at home is urgent. To avoid complications, the Mirror decided to immediately head to the organization's sanctuary. She quickly changed into her attire, putting on a fitted trench coat. It covered her plump, voluptuous figure. Yet, despite the urgent message, she was still confused and unsure about what to do. The mysterious summons from the group did not clarify exactly what had happened. At this moment, the Mirror suddenly thought of a bold method. If a fight is required, this method would certainly force her to manifest her physical state. At that time, it might be worth trying. Meanwhile, her keen senses had already caught a dangerous scent. 1 minute later, the Mercedes-Benz E300 sped away like a streak of lightning. The Mirror's prediction was correct. A woman's figure was now lurking high up, watching everyone's every move. Her eyes shifted restlessly. A barely perceptible smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. The only goal for the woman coming here was to capture that genius assassin. It seems that if Chu Xiao-xian wants to leave unharmed today, it won't be that easy. The man could never have imagined that all he did was bite the woman, and was then forced into 3 months of bed exercises with her, and muddled along in hunting their own kind. This was all because Kim Soo-hyuk's vampire identity had been discovered by the bishop. Now, hundreds of vampires led by Ayaka had completely surrounded the Vatican group. Miss Magic Mirror suddenly received a message from the Vatican group, requesting her to return immediately. The subordinate delivering the message knew nothing about the details. Her woman's sixth sense told her this matter was not simple. Among the many Vatican teams, only one person could summon her in this way. Soon, upon entering the sanctuary, the Mirror respectfully greeted the man. He was an envoy from the Vatican. With his esteemed position, he rarely appeared. Today, there must be a very special reason for his visit. The two first exchanged polite pleasantries. Then the envoy revealed the purpose of summoning her. "I heard that you, Bishop Magic Mirror, recently recruited a vampire, and even slept with him. Is this true?" The Mirror never expected he would know this secret. But at the moment, she couldn't think of any excuse to justify herself. But the Vatican team, whose fate is to hunt vampires, had actually encountered a vicious vampire. It seemed hard to explain. Although at the routine weekly meeting, the Mirror had already reported the details of this matter to the church's department. The envoy felt something was off. But the Mirror was certain. Kim Soo-hyuk had become a qualified member of the Vatican team. After 3 months of diligent training, the man's physical strength and skills had greatly improved. But whether he would bring destruction or salvation, everyone would wait and see. The secret room department's hotel was still brightly lit in the middle of the night. The spacious lobby was bustling with people. However, at the welcoming counter on the first floor, an uninvited guest arrived. The man was just here to book a room. A perfectly ordinary request. But he immediately claimed he had brought 200 people with him. The staff felt something was wrong. Before they could react, the man pulled a sharp knife from his chest. The clerk's body lost its balance and fell backward. The receptionist, who witnessed all of this, had a terrified expression frozen on her face. However, her colleague would never speak again. The short knife had deeply pierced his right eye. A shrill scream echoed through the hotel's long night. The crowd scattered in all directions. The hotel's special security team leader immediately prepared to subdue the man alone. He ordered his subordinates to report to the monitoring center. However, he had yet to realize what awaited him would be a nightmare. At that moment, a loud roar came from behind him. Outside the hotel, blinding lights and engine sounds shone through the glass walls. The man's eyes widened, filled with disbelief. But the lights in front of him kept getting closer. There was a massive crash. Several cars broke through the floor-to-ceiling windows and stormed into the lobby. 2 brand-new BMW 7 Series cars. Yet, the drivers seemed indifferent to the vehicles. The car doors opened, and dozens of burly men rushed out. Each one strong and muscular, with powerful builds. They immediately attacked the special security with weapons. However, the retired agents in the security team were skilled. Unfazed, the leader slashed open the chest of the first man. But the deep wound healed at an unbelievable speed. The man exclaimed, "Oh my god! What the hell is this?" These freaks have the ability to heal automatically. And they also possess a natural thirst for blood. and facing the helpless security team. The man once again grinned wickedly and swung the butcher's knife. Kim Soo-hyuk, in cooperation with the Vatican people, indeed has some trouble with the Nanshan group. These bloodthirsty vampires have already taken a secret potion that activates their potential for this operation. The commander of this operation is undoubtedly Enna's right hand, Ayaka. At her command, over 200 bloodthirsty vampires began to run wild. The proud woman cast a look of appreciation at the person beside her. Without her intelligence, they wouldn't have been able to easily infiltrate the inner sanctum. This woman is the leader of the 6th team of the Nanshan group, Coco. She naturally possesses an extraordinary reconnaissance and mobility ability. Her unique quadrupedal running skill makes her speed more than twice that of normal humans. The raid was going exceptionally smoothly. However, Ayaka began to feel a slight unease. After clearing this floor, she planned to search for Kim Soo-hyuk floor by floor. Yet halfway through, she couldn't see the magic mirror's figure. It seemed like she wasn't on her post. The ones they killed were just cannon fodder. But the more than 200 vampires she brought with her had already taken a drug that boosted their combat abilities. There's no turning back now. When the elevator doors opened, her pupils suddenly widened. The lively little subordinates she had just sent out had now turned into piles of lifeless flesh and blood. Who killed them? These were all undead vampires. Could there be a high-ranking bishop here? Meanwhile, a familiar voice rang out. Long time no see, Ayaka. I heard you've been looking for me lately. What's the matter? When Ayaka saw this person's face, even she couldn't remain calm. Kim Soo-hyuk continued happily, now that I see it's you, I can rest easy. He was enthusiastically making small talk, but the knife in his hand was still dripping with bright red blood. Kim Soo-hyuk stood in the dazzling light, smiling. You and I will settle this once and for all today. When the woman first met the man, he grabbed her chest and squeezed forcefully. But the man wasn't a lecherous rogue. Instead, he was a righteous, iron-willed special forces officer. It was just that the man had unfortunately been infected and turned into a vampire by his lover. He was then chased by the female demon Anna's ruthless warrior, the Serpent Woman. However, the powerful Serpent Woman suddenly turned on her teammates. It turns out that her insatiable thirst made her want to possess Kim Soo-hyuk's body all to herself. What Ayaka didn't expect was that the Kim Soo-hyuk she had been searching for actually walked right into her trap. However, the silver blood blade she held tightly in her hand wouldn't lie. This man would never obediently follow her. Today, there must be a conclusion between Kim Soo-hyuk and Ayaka. Ayaka could clearly feel. The powerful Kim Soo-hyuk seemed to have transformed into a completely different person. Both his skills and strength had undergone a tremendous evolution. The veins across her body were ruthlessly severed. Ayaka didn't even have time to react before she was cut into a bloody mess. The special property of the silver prevented her from healing. This man had grown so powerful in just 1 month. The Ayaka who once seemed like a deity in front of him was now like a child, easily manipulated by him. With all her meridians shattered, she had no strength to resist. Kim Soo-hyuk only needed one strike to take her life. Facing death, even the battle-hardened immortal vampire broke into a cold sweat. When the silver blade was just 1 centimeter from her eye, it stopped. Why did it suddenly stop? Ayaka, who had already closed her eyes, waiting for death, was suspicious. This man didn't seem to have the ability to show mercy. She was right, it wasn't Kim Soo-hyuk holding back. But now, he couldn't move a single step. A silvery voice chuckled lightly. Everyone gather, accompanied by a rustling sound. It seemed like a giant reptile was quietly and heavily crawling forward. Under the dim green mist, a graceful woman walked toward them. Behind her, several giant pythons silently followed. The woman had a sexy figure and a beautiful face. Her eyes were, as expected, a blood-red crimson. It was none other than the 5th captain of the Nanshan group, Katarina. Could it be that the loss of movement ability was caused by this woman's power? Ayaka shouted for the Serpent Woman to help subdue Kim Soo-hyuk. She just smiled slightly, her face showing no sign of panic. At the same time, she controlled the giant snakes, slowly closing in on Kim Soo-hyuk. The giant snakes flicked their green tongues and suddenly attacked like lightning. But the target wasn't Kim Soo-hyuk. Instead, it bit into Ayaka's neck. Her pupils suddenly contracted, unable to believe what was happening before her eyes. However, the thick snake body had already surrounded her in circles. The giant snake exerted a little force. The sudden feeling of suffocation almost crushed the 2 breasts on her chest. This time, it was Kim Soo-hyuk's turn to be stunned. Aren't they both from the Nanshan group? Why are they killing each other? Ayaka was extremely furious. Katarina smiled slightly and softly said, I just want a toy that won't break. Those handsome men, no matter how mighty and strong, couldn't withstand her playfulness. When they were played to death by her, the so-called mementos could only be preserved in formalin. So she had always wanted to find a strong male vampire to be her sex slave. Unexpectedly, Kim Soo-hyuk came to her door on his own. With a gentle wave of the woman's hand, Kim Soo-hyuk's body completely lost control. Mechanically, he stepped toward her. His hands were even controlled to grab the serpent woman's firm, smooth breasts. This woman was perversely flirtatious. The serpent woman extended her long tongue and swallowed her saliva. "You'll always be my male pet. Serve me obediently." Ayaka couldn't take it anymore. She cursed the serpent woman, calling her a filthy bitch, and threatened her with Anna. However, the serpent woman sneered at her complaints, and instead, ordered the giant snake to kill Ayaka and Coco directly. Ayaka was greatly shocked. She couldn't believe that her former comrade would actually try to kill her. Even more unbelievable was that this order came from Anna. They weren't just subordinates working together, but secretly lovers. Extreme disappointment and anger could not help her muster strength again when she was completely powerless. At this moment, all the living people and vampires in the hall were firmly controlled by the serpent woman. Kim Soo-hyuk was still under the effect of the soul steal skill. Meanwhile, the triumphant serpent woman continued to mock and taunt Ayaka. "Such a simple task. How could it take you several months to finish?" Then, with a small wave of her hand, the giant snake opened its large mouth to swallow the woman, only to hear Coco scream, "Katarina, stop!" The serpent woman instinctively paused for a second. But Coco, as the captain of the Nanshan group, was no pushover. If the serpent woman insisted on facing her head-on, the outcome was far from certain. Yet Coco seemed like a delighted fool. She didn't notice the changes in her companions at all. At this moment, Ayaka had already suffered severe injuries, with her meridians shattered and poisoned by the giant snake, her life hanging by a thread. Facing the clueless Coco, who was crying out in distress, the serpent woman came up with an idea. She decided to frame Kim Soo-hyuk as the one responsible for Ayaka's injuries. Infuriated Coco instantly turned her fury toward Kim Soo-hyuk. Though the man knew things were not looking good, he couldn't even open his mouth now. He had no choice but to take the silent defeat. Seeing her plan succeed, the serpent woman was excited, ready to take them back to Anna to claim credit. Now, with Kim Soo-hyuk captured, Anna would surely be pleased. However, things weren't as simple as she imagined. Coco, whom she thought was an idiot after inspecting Ayaka's wounds, raised a critical question. Since Ayaka was seriously injured by Kim Soo-hyuk, why does she smell the unique poison from your family? The serpent woman's expression instantly changed, sharper and colder than Ninguta. No matter how much I calculated, I still missed this crucial point. Having grown up together, they understood each other better than anyone. Yet the serpent woman wasn't planning to let them off easily. "Anyone who stops me shall die." The woman had never tasted the flavor of a man, but after their first close encounter, she fell deeply into obsession. She not only offered her tender body for his enjoyment, but also willingly allowed herself to be shattered and toyed with. This was because Kim Soo-hyuk's body carried the noble blood of the ancestor vampire, which not only healed wounds but also cured the most brutal snake venom. However, faced with the seductive and dangerous serpent woman, Kim Soo-hyuk decided to join forces with his deadliest enemy for a final stand. The heavily injured Ayaka had gradually lost consciousness. Her thoughts drifted back to that prison cell from 10 years ago. Her cellmate's body had already attracted flies, filling the room with a foul stench. Helpless, she could only cry silently. There wasn't a single living person around. Then a vibrant girl's voice came from nearby. "Hello, my name is Coco. Do you need help?" She was the first to offer a helping hand to her. She was also the first to ask her name. Ayaka suddenly woke up from the dream. Sweat, as big as beans, streamed down her face. But the person by her side was none other than Kim Soo-hyuk, whom she had just been fighting with. This guy had not only broken the Soul Steal's secret technique, and quickly regained the ability to move. Could this be the difference in bloodlines? However, the situation was already extremely dire. Due to the serpent woman's venom, both of them lacked the strength to fight. Only Coco was left to face the group of snakes alone. Although it could be said to be evenly matched, the size difference between them was just too great. Coco, with one moment of carelessness, was caught by the giant python and struck directly. However, with her extremely strong willpower, she managed to hold the python's upper and lower jaws tightly with her hands. But she still had strength left. Coco's eyes widened, and she shouted loudly. As foul-smelling, hot blood splattered everywhere, she actually tore the giant python's head in half with her bare hands. To be honest, Coco performed quite well, but it was clear she was showing signs of exhaustion. With the protection of the giant python and the deadly venom, Coco couldn't even get close to the serpent woman. Even her specialty in body techniques had become slower and heavier due to fatigue. Kim Soo-hyuk analyzed. If they continued fighting at this pace, they would all be killed sooner or later. Ayaka, hearing this, became extremely anxious, wanting to get up and fight as well. But in her current state, she would only be a burden. However, Kim Soo-hyuk proposed a new plan. If the three of them teamed up, there might be a slim chance of defeating the serpent woman. Ayaka was shocked. "Weren't you just threatening to kill me earlier? Why are you suggesting teaming up now?" Although it sounded absurd and ridiculous, she really had no better solution. However, Kim Soo-hyuk grinned and raised his silver dagger, aiming at the space between her breasts. It seemed Ayaka was about to be killed on the spot by the silver weapon. Was it still impossible to work together? Meanwhile, the intensity of the battle had exceeded what the serpent woman had imagined. She had already exhausted too much energy and blood. Dealing with Coco, this brainless fool. She still hadn't managed to take her down. Instead, Coco had repeatedly succeeded in sneak attacks. The giant python's subordinates had suffered heavy casualties. Had Coco already developed an immunity to the deadly snake venom? There was no time to think further. The extremely agile Coco had broken through the defenses and directly launched an attack on the serpent woman. Wait, what's up with that flushed face? Could she have been holding her breath the whole time? What a fool! But in the blink of an eye, Coco had already struck her towering chest, sending her flying high into the air. The intense pain made her lose consciousness instantly. The powerful impact even shattered the building's structure. Coco's punch was full of force, leaving a large hole in the building's wall. Cold air immediately rushed in. At the same time, the poisonous gas that had filled the room also vanished with the airflow. Coco, taking deep breaths, was filled with lingering fear. If the battle had continued for another minute, she might not have been able to hold her breath any longer. Finally able to breathe, she thought of Ayaka. However, she couldn't find anyone around. It turned out that Kim Soo-hyuk was lying in front of her, doing something. Suddenly, her vision went black. Her legs gave way, and she collapsed to the ground. Her whole body felt limp, with green veins faintly visible beneath her skin. She realized she had been struck by the deadly snake venom. Unbeknownst to her, a dark green little snake had silently bitten her jade foot, spreading its deadly venom throughout her body. Despite this, Coco's energy had far exceeded the serpent woman's expectations. With the help of several giant pythons on her back, the serpent woman actually climbed up the nearly vertical wall. The woman walked toward her slowly in elegant high heels, exuding the aura of death. I heard you and your friends are very close. So close you can't bear to be apart. I promise you, this time you and she will be together forever. Coco, who had just been full of life, could no longer dodge. She could only watch with wide eyes as the giant python opened its blood-filled mouth, about to swallow her whole. Suddenly, a flash of light cut down from above, and the giant snake's body was cleanly sliced in half. The serpent woman, faced with this sudden change, was momentarily at a loss. The one who came was none other than Coco's closest sister, Ayaka. Seeing her sister safe and sound, Coco, who had been waiting for death, was overjoyed beyond measure. But what the serpent woman couldn't understand was, only Anna and she herself can neutralize the poison. How did Ayaka manage to break the poison? It turns out Ayaka had been paralyzed by the poison earlier, and had to leave her fate to chance. Kim Soo-hyuk, taking advantage of the situation, tried to undress her. He even pointed a dagger at Ayaka's eyes, but he didn't kill her. Instead, he stabbed his own palm. Ayaka, trembling in fear, asked if he had gone mad and was hurting himself. A woman once told me, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." When you've given everything, only to be abandoned because you're no longer useful, even betrayed, hurt by the one you trusted the most. I understand that feeling so well. Ayaka was completely confused, not knowing what he was trying to do with this emotional outburst. Unexpectedly, Kim Soo-hyuk extended his hand. He only wanted Ayaka to drink his blood. In this moment, it was just like the help Coco once extended to her. The serpent woman stopped smiling coldly, knowing the balance of power had shifted. People with nothing left are the most dangerous, because they have no escape. Now, the two enemies would join forces, although their combat power was at an absolute disadvantage. In this life-or-death struggle, they were destined to be the final winners. The dying woman drank just a drop of blood, and miraculously came back to life. However, the first thing she did upon waking wasn't to give herself to him, but instead slapped him so hard that he passed out. Then she sat down on his private parts. Little did Coco know, her self-righteous move would lead to the sudden death of her beloved. The near-death Ayaka, with Kim Soo-hyuk's help, quickly regained her combat strength. She was determined to team up and fight the serpent woman. With this, the scale of victory no longer tilted in the serpent woman's favor. The most dangerous opponent is often not the strongest one, but those who have already lost everything. When you face a warrior with no way out, there's only one road left: death. In the hotel's secret room, the man was running frantically. Though he transmitted the message to the magic mirror, it wasn't good news. "This is bad, Archbishop of the Magic Mirror. A large group of vampires are attacking, and they have already killed the guards and breached the hotel." In the hall, Kim Soo-hyuk is engaged in a fierce battle with the snakes. However, these poisonous snakes keep rushing out from behind the snake woman. Once bitten by a poisonous snake, or inhaling the toxic smoke, the body will instantly fall into a paralyzed state, unable to move at all. Even worse, it will be in an extremely weak state, controlled by the snake woman. This is why Kim Soo-hyuk was controlled by the snake woman to massage her chest. Fortunately, The duration of the toxic mist isn't long. A new strategy must be devised to break the deadlock. Otherwise, faced with the snake woman's overwhelming attack, total annihilation is only a matter of time. With one sword, Kim Soo-hyuk could sever a row of snake heads. But the despairing thing is, they would regrow within a second. Then they would continue to attack him in cycles. But they aren't mindless, low-level creatures. After Kim Soo-hyuk pierced the snake's head with his sword, the snake actually bit onto the silver sword tightly, trying to take it away. And the snake swarm, in perfect coordination, launched a group attack at that moment. This is bad. Kim Soo-hyuk was held back and couldn't counterattack. In a flash, Ayaka arrived on horseback. With a few quick strikes, she killed the group of demons. She shouted loudly, trying to boost morale. Do you think losing the silver sword means death? These poisonous snakes are supplied with blood directly from the snake woman herself. So they are definitely not infinitely usable. The snake woman's plan was to exhaust their stamina first. Ayaka decided to split up and act separately. She would fight the snake swarm. The paralyzed Coco was the dilemma in Kim Soo-hyuk's mind. To avoid her suddenly launching a surprise attack after recovering, Kim Soo-hyuk made it clear to her that he had agreed to fight alongside Ayaka. Without hesitation, he offered his blood to Coco to purify her snake poison. After Coco drank a drop of his blood, her eyes suddenly widened and became sharp, and she stood up. But the first thing she did after recovering was to punch Kim Soo-hyuk in the face. Then, like a monkey, she leapt high and sat down on her man's most vulnerable spot. Kim Soo-hyuk seemed to hear the sorrow of his balls. Could this woman be under control? But to his surprise, she shouted, "Ayaka! I've caught that bastard Kim Soo-hyuk!" Ayaka, busy with killing enemies, shouted, "Idiot! I just made an alliance with this guy. We must work together to deal with the serpent woman." After receiving such an answer from her beloved, Coco awkwardly looked at Kim Soo-hyuk, whom she was riding, and then shamelessly strutted out. Originally, the serpent woman's plan was flawless. First, by effortlessly using these two fools with zero intelligence, she found Kim Soo-hyuk. Then, without them noticing, she made them contract a fatal poison, and they would die. However, Kim Soo-hyuk actually detoxified his enemies, and then persuaded them to team up. Such an outstanding man made her overjoyed. Yes, I must have him, and then make him my husband every night. Yet Kim Soo-hyuk never anticipated her little schemes. In fact, he nearly became her captive, turned into her sex slave. The serpent woman commanded the venomous snakes to spray out a large amount of poisonous mist. The thick poisonous gas, once inhaled, would cause irreversible, severe damage. Kim Soo-hyuk understood in his heart. There was no retreat in this situation. Yet he, Ayaka, and Coco held their breath, focusing intently, standing back to back in a triangular formation, ready to complement each other at any moment. Then, the air was filled not only with poisonous gas, but also with the smoke from the smoke bombs after they exploded. If the guess is correct, the serpent woman's next attack must kill one of the three. Whether it's the battle-hardened Ayaka, or Coco, who is single-handedly facing off against the enemy, they wouldn't be so easily killed. However, to Kim Soo-hyuk's surprise, the serpent woman personally launched a surprise attack, aiming to kill the weakest Coco. And Coco had already turned red in the face from holding her breath. The serpent woman was still resentful about the slap she had just received, which is why she decided to kill Coco first, as revenge. At the life or death moment, Ayaka shoved Coco aside and stood in front of him, but she was bitten multiple times by the venomous snakes. Her pupils instantly dilated, as the snake venom rapidly invaded her brain. Coco, who couldn't react in time, could only fret anxiously. But as Kim Soo-hyuk struck with his sword, he nearly cut the serpent woman in half. After finally creating some space, Kim Soo-hyuk quickly prepared to use his blood to save Ayaka. But out of breath, he was stunned by the sight before him. The venomous snake, with perfect accuracy, had bitten Ayaka's chest. When its head was chopped off with a sword, the sight before Kim Soo-hyuk left him speechless. Even Coco, beside him, was so scared she wet herself. A bright, shining sword was sticking between the woman's breasts. The happiest thing in this woman's life was being torn apart by the libertine mistress, and then thrown into the wild to be fed to mad dogs. This was because she was an immortal vampire. But Anna, who had vented her sexual desire on her, had instead sent her new lover to kill her with a deadly silver sword. However, what was surprising was that her last wish was to gently kiss Kim Soo-hyuk on the lips. When Ayaka was only 8 years old, her mother sold her to a man. The value of a cute and lively little girl could only be exchanged for a box of flour, enough to last the couple for a week. These poor children were all gathered in a secret experimental facility to test a mysterious potion called Blood Red, developed by Dr. Lee. After Blood Red was injected into Ayaka's veins, her eyes instantly turned a terrifying scarlet. She vomited blood, and her tightly bound body couldn't stop struggling violently. This inhumane experiment repeated day after day, and everyone's mind became increasingly distorted. Until one day, the roommates in the same room all died. Ayaka, growing increasingly fearful, even envied the children who had frozen to death. However, in this moment of despair, a girl extended a helping hand to her. This girl would later become her close friend Coco. Ayaka had a deep impression of Coco. The surrounding children were lifeless, the atmosphere eerie and heavy, but only Coco could still smile in such a hellish environment. And it was precisely because of this that Ayaka's life seemed to gain a bit of color. The daily human experiments continued relentlessly. Each time, a tragic torment of blood and tears intertwined. But now with Coco's company, everything seemed bearable. However, this small joy was short-lived. According to the experiment's dosage requirements, all the test subjects would be divided into 2 groups. Coco and Ayaka were forced to be separated. The girl's anger was in vain. After all, ants cannot shake a great tree. The only thing Ayaka could do was throw her coat to Coco and swear that she would rescue her in the future. And this pair of good friends would meet again. It has been 5 years. After enduring round after round of experimental torture, Ayaka finally entered the combat training class. But to her surprise, she saw a familiar figure. That familiar jacket. That messy yellow curly hair. Ayaka was ecstatic. She rushed from behind and hugged the woman. "Is it really you, Coco? I'm so glad you're still alive." The woman suddenly turned around, but her eyes revealed a terrifying confusion. "Who are you? I don't know you." Ayaka was initially shocked. Then she calmed herself and gently said, "Let's be good friends." It turned out that after enduring the experiments, Coco had already gone insane. Her behavior had even become more like that of a feline. One of them had an unstable physical state. The other had an unstable mental state. None of the Nanshan group members were optimistic about them. They suggested directly killing them. However, that woman was very optimistic about this pair. They fell into another hell. The harsh training repeated day after day, overloading their bodies, something they could barely endure. But Ayaka understood in her heart. If they couldn't meet that person's expectations, one day they would be discarded like trash. The only comfort was the brief rest the 2 of them had at night. However, after countless humiliations and mockeries from Anna, her mental world had already become numb. When Kim Soo-hyuk pierced his palm, using his own blood to extend her life, Ayaka's soul, like a walking corpse, was finally moved. When she had given everything but was abandoned by the organization, it was just like being used by Anna like trash and thrown away. It was Kim Soo-hyuk who pulled her out of the pile of dead bodies again. This was the first time someone truly understood her inner thoughts. Ironically, the person who did this was her sworn enemy, who would draw a blade against her. Ayaka's body trembled violently. Her body began to disintegrate into countless fragments and float into the air. To survive, she had soiled her hands countless times. She knew right from wrong but was powerless to change it. All because of Anna, who always held their lives in her hands. Yet the man in front of her seemed to show her a glimmer of hope. She softly called Kim Soo-hyuk's name to summon him. Then, in a barely audible voice, she whispered a few words. Kim Soo-hyuk's face was filled with disbelief. However, it seemed like he had made a certain decision, and after a pause, he bent down and kissed Ayaka on the lips in one swift motion. Her life was almost over, yet she smiled and said thank you. This was one of the few smiles in her life. She struggled to lift one hand. Gently, she caressed Coco's face. She told her not to be sad. The one thing she cared about most in this world was Coco. This partner who had fought through life and death with her, saved her in her lowest moments, helped her through countless long nights, endured the greatest pain with her. Now, it was all gone. Maybe, for her, this was the best ending. Coco just watched as her body dissipated into the air, leaving only the empty combat suit. Coco could no longer suppress her immense sadness. After all, her best friend had died right in front of her. But could Ayaka's death bring about a victory? The girl had once thought she was a stone woman. But unexpectedly, the man forcibly seized the ominous sign. Then, in front of everyone, stripped her down to nothing but lace underwear. This was because Kim Soo-hyuk was being relentlessly hunted by the church. To prove that he had allied with the Vatican Saintess, he had to reveal the shameful truth of their cohabitation. However, Kim Soo-hyuk's most troublesome issue right now was how to deal with these women who were throwing themselves at him. Ayaka's body had completely dissipated. Only the empty combat suit remained. Coco, deeply saddened, was already in tears. Her close friend sacrificed her life to save her, but she would never come back. And the snake woman, that vile creature, was still mocking her. She kept provoking Coco, the friend you supported unconditionally. In the end, didn't she die because of your meaningless death? Let's go back and serve Lady Anna. Seeing Coco still crying uncontrollably, the snake woman believed that Coco's emotions had collapsed. Now was the best opportunity to recruit her. After all, she was a strong individual. After a brief silence, Kim Soo-hyuk suddenly spoke. Ayaka, I know what I need to do. The nonsensical muttering left the snake woman feeling helpless. Had these two gone mad? At this moment, Coco murmured something again. The snake woman thought she had agreed to return with her. He perked up his ears and listened carefully. To his surprise, the guy suddenly shouted at a volume 100 times louder, "Give me back Ayaka!" Before the words even left her mouth, she shot toward the snake woman with the fastest speed of her life. The snake woman remained unshaken, standing still, waiting for her to strike. Suddenly, a loud bang followed by a blinding flash, and with no mercy, blocked Coco's attack. The sudden change left Kim Soo-hyuk dumbfounded. Even the experienced snake woman had never seen such a move. Thanks to her exceptional skills, Coco managed to retreat unscathed from the explosion. However, before anyone could catch their breath, a large group of people in black rushed out from the darkness. It was the Vantafeng Church. Did these guys come to save me after all? Kim Soo-hyuk secretly rejoiced. A slender and athletic figure appeared before him, wearing the familiar, curvaceous uniform of the mirror. But the light was too dazzling, and Kim Soo-hyuk could only try to stop the other from acting rashly. Before he could finish his sentence, a silver bullet had already neared his pupil. Luckily, with his time-freezing ability, Kim Soo-hyuk slightly tilted, and the bullet grazed his neck as it flew past. The warriors in front of him had their guns pointed directly at him. Who were these people? Suddenly, a girl's ethereal voice rang out. "There are so many vampires here." Kim Soo-hyuk couldn't help but shiver. This person was not the mirror. A girl walked toward him, glowing with dazzling magical light. She was slender and beautiful, but her words were extremely eerie. "Don't worry. I'll kill all of you." The attack she just launched was filled with divine power. Even her pupils were pierced with a cross. Without a doubt, this person must be a member of the Vantafeng Church. The girl moved briskly, saying the harshest words. "You're quite brave, coming to the Vantafeng Church's headquarters alone. But no one is more reckless than the snake woman." She flipped her long hair and laughed. "No, you're the brave one, bringing me so many playmates. Let's have some fun together." A large amount of deadly green poison mist shot out of nowhere. In the blink of an eye, it filled the entire room. Kim Soo-hyuk hurriedly reminded everyone to hold their breath. Otherwise, they would become Snake Woman's slaves. The church members weren't unaware either. They obediently covered their mouths and noses. Meanwhile, Snake Woman controlled the poisonous snakes and rushed toward the girl. However, she only lowered her head slightly. A cold smile formed on the corner of her lips. The snake's head slammed into a wall. It bounced back. The girl had somehow summoned a magical barrier. It surrounded her completely. She smiled and raised her hand, gathering a magic light ball in her palm. "Now it's my turn." With a loud explosion, the snake's head was blown far away. Killing such a formidable enemy with ease left Kim Soo-hyuk in disbelief. Who exactly was this woman? She was too strong. After the poisonous mist from the snake's corpse dissipated, she looked around, but she vaguely sensed that something was off. Snake Woman! The despicable and cunning woman was gone. Only the severed snake head remained on the ground. The poison mist had already cleared. It seemed that Snake Woman really ran away. However, the girls suddenly started to complain. Where did that woman die? The strange nasal tone contrasted greatly with her earlier ruthless skills. Although the girl was a bishop, she still appeared like an immature child. At this moment, Kim Soo-hyuk stepped forward, analyzing and gesturing. Since the girl had blown off the snake's head with one blow, perhaps Snake Woman had used the smoke to conceal herself and hid inside the snake's head to escape. The girl was quite satisfied with Kim Soo-hyuk's reasonable analysis. She planned to immediately chase and kill that vile woman. But before that, she needed to do something. Kim Soo-hyuk keenly sensed the danger. He grabbed Coco, that fool, by the collar. Then, he swiftly pulled her along as they ran. They dodged a round of bullets fired at them. The girl laughed. "You're a good vampire. I'll make sure you die without pain." Kim Soo-hyuk urgently said, "I've allied with Mirror Bishop. We're not enemies." The girl smiled even brighter. "I believe you, sure. How could our church ally with vampires? What a joke." If Kim Soo-hyuk hadn't held Coco's head, she would have already turned to ashes. Could it be that the news hasn't been made public within the Vatican Wind Church yet? The woman was about to deliver a fatal blow. Kim Soo-hyuk looked into her eyes. A flash of inspiration struck him. "Room 1701, I live there with Mirror." The girl seemed a bit stunned. She thought quietly for 10 seconds. Then, she suddenly panicked and screamed. "My most respected Mirror sister is actually living with a man? And might have done that kind of thing." Upon thinking about this, the girl blushed in embarrassment. Then, the man said something even more shocking. "Today, your Mirror sister is wearing black pants." The woman rewards the man with a steamed bun every day. However, this is not some lewd or vulgar matter. It's because, as a vampire, he needs to consume a sufficient amount of blood every day. But the ignorant, inexperienced girl mistakenly thought her sister was being abused by the man. She even started to have improper thoughts and planned a group activity. Little did she know, Kim Soo-hyuk, who bore deep grudges, wasn't interested in such things. His only belief was to kill the vampire leader, Anna. The Vatican Church was silent in the late night. The roar of a Mercedes-Benz E300 cut through the night. The woman opened the car door and jumped out. It was Miss Mirror. What came into view, however, was 2 cars crashing into the first floor of the building. She screamed in alarm and rushed forward at full speed. She understood that the vampires were putting on a feint while she was absent. If Kim Soo-hyuk was captured so easily, then everything would be over. Kicking open the door, Mira shouted, "Shiolin, don't be afraid, Mom is here." But Kim Soo-hyuk was standing perfectly fine there. It was Coco, whom he had been holding, who was trembling. The most shocked on sight was Mira's little fan, Lucia. They really know each other. Mira was also stunned by the scene before her. How could these opposing forces be together? For safety's sake, the group moved to a hotel room. Room 1701, what that guy said was all true. Lucia could hardly believe it. This operation involved 3 vampire leaders. 1 was killed, 1 escaped, and 1 was captured. Mira felt a sense of fear just thinking about it. This time, it could really be said that they narrowly escaped disaster. Otherwise, Anna would use him to slaughter indiscriminately. These vampires actually attacked the building while Mira was away. This proves their intelligence network is extremely powerful. At the same time, this hotel was no longer safe. Mira had already considered this, and decided that from now on, the 2 of them would never be apart. Looking at the handsome, yet cold man before her, Mira silently observed for a moment without speaking. Then, she sighed with relief. This man had been beaten half to death the first time he faced vampires. Now, he was surviving while fighting 3 vampires at once. The reason his combat power had evolved to such strength was not only due to combat training that surpassed human strength and speed, but more importantly, from daily consumption of fresh human blood. Although his progress was still not fast enough, if he could continue these actions, killing Anna would only be a matter of time. But Kim Soo-hyuk didn't show any excitement. Instead, he made a grim face. He even criticized Mira. "Don't leave your post recklessly." Mira wanted to argue, but Kim Soo-hyuk raised his hand to signal for a big move. "I'm not listening, just nonsense." Mira couldn't do anything about this little brat's face. She had no choice but to listen to whatever ideas he had. Little did she know, what he said next made her explode on the spot. "I found a way to get stronger quickly." Mira's pupils widened, and she waited in silence for him to speak. It turned out that before Ayaka died, she had secretly whispered to him. She wasn't talking about any romantic affairs, but rather secretly told him a crucial piece of information. The more blood vampires consume, the stronger they become. With his current rate of growth, he would never be able to challenge Anna. But if you consume vampire blood, you can steal their accumulated power. After meeting certain conditions, you might even gain new abilities. Mira was skeptical, leaving aside the truth of this claim. The conditions for gaining abilities were also unclear. But Kim Soo-hyuk thought this was worth a try. During the final kiss with Ayaka, in fact, he had absorbed a considerable amount of blood. Then, when facing the silver bullets shot by the followers, he suddenly noticed the trajectory of the bullets seemed to slow down. And without realizing it, he had mastered the ability to briefly slow down the passage of time. It was said that Anna had 7 extremely powerful vampire leaders under her command. Kim Soo-hyuk had found a new target. Drink the blood of these 7 leaders. Mira was moved by his grand plan. "So you brought this thing just to drink her blood, right?" For now, Lucia had temporarily imprisoned her with a holy barrier, like a dog, and secretly adopted so many vampires. Mira found this very troublesome. The monthly bishop meeting was about to begin. At the meeting where all the leaders of the Vatican Church would be present, everyone would usually discuss Anna's latest movements. But the latest meeting topic was none other than Kim Soo-hyuk, how she absorbed the vampires into her group, which made some people very unhappy, although due to her extremely high status within, this wasn't a big issue. Moreover, Mira was actually constantly monitoring Shiolin's behavior, and up until this moment, Mira had finally considered him a trustworthy companion. In the recent tough battles, Kim Soo-hyuk had proven his worth time and again. Mira, however, slowly unbuttoned her top, revealing 2 snow-white buns. Tilting her neck, she said, "You must be hungry. Here's a reward, come eat." Lucia, who was outside, didn't dare to make a sound, suddenly shuddered upon hearing this. Impossible, a lone man and a woman in the same room. What could they be eating? Could it be that thing? She didn't dare to think. Kim Soo-hyuk reluctantly stood up. "Aren't we eating this every day? What's this reward talk?" Lucia continued to widen her eyes. "What? Eating every day? Looks like this isn't the first time, huh?" Kim Soo-hyuk bit down, and Mira couldn't help but act coquettishly. "At first, you were so excited, desperately rushing in. But now you're becoming more and more composed and calm." Kim Soo-hyuk responded. "If I'm being too rough, just tell me." At that moment, Lucia's face turned pale with fright. Were these 2 really doing that most embarrassing thing? Her nosebleed suddenly started to flow. "Sister, are you really doing that with him?" Suddenly, the 2 of them discussed. "Earlier you said more is better. Should we invite Lucia to join?" Actually, this was about making her the host for plasma. Let Shiolin absorb her blood. But in her ears, it turned into the three of them engaging in a happy activity together. The woman's nosebleed suddenly shot out like a fountain. Miru noticed she hadn't reacted for a while and opened the door to inquire. To her surprise, this woman had actually fainted from excessive nosebleed. Is she on her period? The handsome boy that women dream of possessing was actually a complete troublemaker. Not only did he force the woman to scrub for 2 hours, but he also shamelessly kissed her best friend in front of her. However, all of this was just Kim Soo-yuk's disguise. All the sexy women around him were tools he used. To defeat his arch-nemesis, vampire leader Anna, he had to find a way to absorb blood from the girl's body. It had been a long time since they last met. Lucia warmly said goodbye to Mira. However, her gaze towards Kim Soo-yuk was filled with jealousy and hostility. She then jumped into a Mercedes-Benz E300 and quickly drove off. Now that the fool had left, only one major issue remained. The mentally deranged Coco was still arrogantly shouting, "Hurry up and bring me a cup of fresh virgin blood. Then get me a bath and steam sauna." "Shut your mouth." Mirror slapped a heavy smack on her messy head. What Mirror couldn't understand was there any use in keeping such a stinky, unbathed, and smelly big-breasted vampire? Kim Soo-yuk bluntly said, "Just when I need vampire blood. Let's just treat her as a mobile blood bank." But bringing this woman along meant supplying her with more blood. Mirror didn't want this stinky woman to bite. Fortunately, this woman had top-tier reconnaissance and tracking abilities. She also considered her combat capabilities to rival the leaders. She was still a capable assistant. That's not wrong. But can such an unstable person really be controlled? Coco tightly clung to Kim Soo-yuk, hiding behind him and shouting loudly. Mirror noticed she especially liked to stay by Kim Soo-yuk's side. Why was that? Kim Soo-yuk quietly stared at her without saying a word. Her abnormal mental state reminded him of himself after his teammates were killed. The furious rage drove him to kill everyone in the police station, including the detective who had framed him. If it happened again, he would kill them all without hesitation. And the girl in front of him had just lost her closest person. It was then that Kim Soo-yuk decided to have a serious talk with her. "Our current goal is to kill your master, Anna. If you're willing to join us, that would be great. But listen carefully, if you're unwilling, you're definitely not a necessary force." Saying that, Kim Soo-yuk slowly drew his silver sword. "You can be killed as a vampire by me. Or you can fight with us for revenge against your friend. Now make your choice." Coco lowered her head and said nothing. After a moment, she slowly spoke. "I hate that Anna. She's the one who's been tormenting Ayaka. I also hate the Vantafeng. They've been chasing Ayaka together. Now she's all bruised up." Coco suddenly yelled. "But if you guys can kill that bitch Anna, I'll do anything you want." Good. With that, the three of them happily reached an agreement. Since two vampires were absorbed as subordinates, Mirror would bring them to the bishop's meeting. Mirror said seriously, "And once you two show any signs of losing control or harming your teammates, you will be executed immediately." But as soon as she said that, she regretted it. Her tone seemed a bit too harsh. Soon, the three of them returned to the hotel room. The shower in the bathroom was running noisily, accompanied by Coco's curses, "Stinky bitch. How dare you torment me like this?" It turned out Mirror was washing Coco, who was smelly all over. Her dark, grimy armpits were almost growing mushrooms. The vampire hunter who kills vampires every day, now reduced to washing this dead dog's body. Just thinking about it made her furious. Wasn't it all to satisfy this pretty boy's needs? Changing her mindset, having another helper was actually a good thing. Besides, this guy's combat ability was really something. But her hair, which hadn't been washed in over 30 years, was all tangled and disgusting. Mirror used an excessive amount of shampoo, accidentally dripping some into Coco's eyes. Kim Soo-yuk was wiping his 18 centimeters big machete. Suddenly, he heard a commotion from the bathroom. With a bang, the bathroom door was suddenly kicked open. A strong woman, naked and shining, crawled out on all fours. She screamed, "This bitch tried to poison me. She deliberately dripped poison into my eyes." Before she could finish speaking, she was dragged back in. Although the women screamed, insisting on not being seen, Kim Soo-yuk, however, was focused, staring straight ahead. He wasn't interested in any white bunnies. His thoughts had long drifted back to when he was still a police officer. That year, he was only 18. He had just been promoted to Special Operations Team Leader. He was on great terms with two of his brothers. Even the commander regarded him as an ace agent. He remembered how wonderful those days were. Carefree, doing the job he loved. But now, it seemed like 10 years had passed. Yet it felt like it was just yesterday. The two women fighting seemed to be inaudible to him. He just silently wiped his head. Mirror, who had been busy the whole evening, could finally lie down on the bed and rest. What irritated her most was that this bear vampire wouldn't listen to her. Instead, she obeyed Kim Soo-yuk's orders like a military dog. She obediently put on her clothes. She didn't even move when he dried her hair. Maybe it was because Mirror had once beaten up her friend, so she held a grudge. This crazy woman considered Ayaka her most precious treasure. Just as Mirror cherished the cross on her chest, losing her most precious friend, yet being trapped in the enemy's territory, it was hard not to be so sensitive. Gradually letting go, Mirror lay on the bed and fell into a peaceful sleep. But she was awoken by a rustling sound. When she opened her eyes, Coco was actually biting her hand. It seemed like this girl was hungry and wanted to eat. Mirror gave a motherly, tolerant smile. Her right hand silently picked up a 1.8-meter long big machete. After Kim Suak finished handling the two women's trivial matters, he also rested. He was suddenly awoken by another loud noise. From the next room came the clashing sounds of fighting and arguing. He just perked up his ears for a moment, then continued to fall back into a deep sleep. "Miss Mirror, I'll leave Coco in your care tonight." But a drop of saliva fell on his face. It turned out that the curvy Coco had silently climbed into his bed. Looking at his smooth, handsome face, Coco wondered whether to bite him or do something else. The woman never said she was a virgin, yet she crawled out of his bed, her lips still dripping with milky fluid. After that, she engaged with him in a passionate battle of 100 rounds. This was the devilish training that Kim Suyak underwent to quickly become stronger. Meanwhile, the vampire Anna had already set up a deadly trap for him. However, Kim Suak had absorbed Miss Mirror's blood essence. Once he gained the support of the divine power of the Van Diven, he would have the strength to resist Anna. He would have the power to stand against Anna. The sunlight streamed in through the gap in the curtains. Kim Suyak felt a warm sensation on his face. He slowly opened his eyes. "Why is the blanket so heavy today?" He lifted the blanket and immediately widened his eyes. There was a woman lying under the blanket. Upon closer inspection, it was Coco. What is she doing here? Is she hiding from the deadly sunlight? He felt extremely awkward inside. Kim Suak tried to wake her up. Suddenly, a great force lifted the blanket, and both the blanket and the person were thrown onto the floor. "What are you making such a fuss about?" Kim Suak scolded. To his surprise, Coco was still deeply asleep. She had no awareness at all. Suddenly, a sobbing sound came from under the blanket. This tough-looking woman actually had a weak side. She was muttering Ayaka's name. Could she have mistaken herself for Ayaka? Kim Suak thought for a moment and suddenly realized. Since Xiaolin had drunk Ayaka's blood, he had the scent of Ayaka on him. No wonder she had always obeyed his commands. And the pain of losing the most precious companion, Xiaolin had also experienced. That's why they shared a common enemy. Looking at the woman crying in sorrow, he gently comforted her. "It's okay. Everything is in the past," just as his team leader had said to him back then. At that time, Kim Suak had broken down emotionally due to the death of his teammates. The most tragic part was, it was because of this that he became a vampire, neither human nor demon. With Kim Suyuk's soft words of comfort, Coco slowly stopped crying. The sun was high in the sky, but the hotel where Kim Suyuk was staying was far from peaceful. Hellish superhuman combat training was in progress. Kim Suyuk quickly dodged Mirror's combination punches. However, she still found an opportunity to strike a powerful blow. Kim Suyuk realized he couldn't avoid it. In a moment of quick thinking, he used his superpower to slow down time. He easily ducked his head to avoid the strike. Then, he swiftly threw a left hook. Just as Kim Suyuk's counterattack was about to hit her two white buns, Kim Suyuk's body trembled. His entire body suddenly stopped moving. It turned out that Mirror had actually grabbed his fist with one hand. "You're much stronger than yesterday." With the blessing of Ayaka's blood, whether it was strength, speed, or destructive power, Kim Suyuk had greatly improved. Today happened to be the day for the Archbishop's meeting. This would greatly help Mirror's standing. However, Kim Suyuk's current status had not been officially approved. This was a good opportunity to apply for official recognition. But what if he was rejected? Kim Suyuk anxiously asked. "What happens if I'm not approved?" Mirror grinned wickedly. "Of course, you'll be executed on the spot." Haha. However, Mirror reassured him not to worry. With Kim Suyuk's potential and talent, there should be no problem getting the church's approval. In the meantime, Kim Suyuk had proven himself twice. First, by using himself to lure out many hidden vampires. And within a short time, he had evolved to a level where he could compete with captain-level vampires. Considering Kim Suyuk's contributions, he was likely the key to ending Anna's eastern invasion of Korea. Yet, he still lacked confidence in his abilities. Despite being incredibly strong as a human, he had found ways to quickly enhance his base abilities. But the biggest issue remained time. As long as there was enough time for training and blood absorption, he believed the day he would kill Anna would not be far off. The first priority now was to finish that damn meeting quickly. Then he could focus on training. Mirror was very pleased with his arrogant speech. "No wonder he's the man I slept with." The group immediately gathered and set off towards the Vatican building. Although they spoke grandly, Kim Suyuk still had some concerns deep inside. Whether it was Anna and the leaders, or Kim Suyuk himself, to the church, they were all demons from hell. Whether he was being used by the Van Diven, or using the Van Diven himself, He was not at peace. What he was at peace with was the unjust death of his brothers. The flames of revenge were burning stronger, sure to spread. Meanwhile, 2 of the 7 leaders under Anna had already been eliminated. Right now, Kim Soo-hyuk was only 5 steps away from her. But what he didn't know was that the snake woman had already safely run back to the temporary headquarters to report to her seductive boss, Anna. It was now confirmed that Ayaka's death and Coco's defection to the Van Diven were true. However, Anna's mind was solely focused on finding out Kim Soo-hyuk's current status. However, just as Anna had meticulously planned all along, Kim Soo-hyuk's combat abilities were undergoing significant evolution. He could even eliminate the lethal mutated snake venom. It seemed that it wouldn't be long before this potential young man would come knocking on her door. But Anna had already prepared a countermeasure. She was sure she could kill him. The high-level archbishop meeting was to be held in this grand cathedral. However, this was not the same church Kim Soo-hyuk had seen before. This was a regular church, not a holy place. Considering that Kim Soo-hyuk couldn't enter the holy ground, the church specially arranged a meeting here. However, to prevent him from going berserk, Mirror still made him wear the precious silver bracelet. This was a critical matter, so it was better to be cautious. Many of the bishops still held animosity toward him, and they would surely stir up trouble during the meeting. Suddenly, a weathered voice stopped the two. "Mirror, is this the vampire beside you?" The woman was originally a holy, pure church maiden, but she was grabbed by the lowly vampire, who squeezed her buttocks forcefully. Even the innocent, silent young disciple was so shocked by the suggestive scene that she had a nosebleed. However, this was just a scene Kim Soo-hyuk had staged. Everything was for the purpose of joining the Vatican, a church with powerful divine powers. But he never expected that Coco, who had been obedient, would suddenly vanish. Worse still, it almost cost them both their lives. To his surprise, just as Kim Soo-hyuk arrived at the church, he encountered the Pope. The moment the arrogant group of dopas arrived, they immediately trembled and kneeled, licking up to him. Cardinal Helena was the highest leader of the Van Diven Church. Seeing this, the muscular woman had to apologize for the rude behavior of the arrogant group, and the extremely clever Helena likely guessed the cause of the conflict. Without Kim Soo-hyuk, an outsider, Mirror probably wouldn't have fallen out with her colleagues. The decision that would determine their lives or deaths would be made in the Archbishop's meeting presided over by Helena. But from the current situation, it was less of a meeting, and more of a death sentence trial. Without a legitimate reason, the audacious Kim Soo-hyuk. At this moment, he also knows fear. He hadn't said a word all morning. Now, the only one who can support them is Lucia. Mirror, who usually talks big, is actually quite anxious. What if something goes wrong in today's meeting? The church would be the tomb for Kim Soo-hyuk and Coco. Helena's aura is extremely powerful. As a figure like the Pope, she is perfectly suited to host such an important meeting. Kim Soo-hyuk was shakily brought up. Seeing the bishops discuss him, she still spoke meaningless, indifferent greetings. Annoyed, Cecilia quickly interrupted and raised a very crucial question. Why would 2 disgusting vampires appear in this holy place? Kim Soo-hyuk just stood quietly, not moving an inch or refuting. This straightforward approach was also something Mirror hadn't anticipated. Helena had already listened to everyone's opinions. After weighing the pros and cons, she decided to start a vote on the matter. The life or death of these 2 vampires would be decided by the bishops present. Each person would cast their vote on the matter. The final result would be decided by majority rule. The next step was for each archbishop to express their views on the matter. Naturally, Cecilia held an opposing view, hoping to personally execute Kim Soo-hyuk. Archbishop Dominique also expressed a desire to eliminate them, citing inability to control them as the reason. Some people, however, lacked their own opinion and just blindly followed, like the red-haired woman, Sid. However, at this moment, Helena casually mentioned that Lucia had also seen Kim Soo-hyuk. Lucia recalled the first time she saw Kim Soo-hyuk. It was when the Serpent Woman was single-handedly slaughtering the Vatican's followers, and Kim Soo-hyuk, in order to save his comrades, even sacrificed himself to ensure everyone's safety. Besides, if he hadn't reminded everyone to cover their mouths and noses in time, they would probably have been wiped out. However, the Vatican soldiers didn't learn his identity in time, and regarded him as an enemy, attacking him. Even though Kim Soo-hyuk was fully capable of fighting the special forces, he didn't retaliate in the slightest. This behavior clearly shows he is very rational, and wouldn't randomly attack others. Lucia concluded that Kim Soo-hyuk is entirely under Mirror's control, as if he were her slave. Moreover, she would personally experience the warm moments between the two, even though it was in her imagination. Just thinking about the 2 of them doing something interesting beside her, Lucia couldn't help but once again spray a large amount of nosebleed. And as one of the bishops, Mirror naturally unconditionally supported Kim Soo-hyuk. She had seen through this man's heart. He was undoubtedly a loyal and reliable warrior. Cecilia seemed like she had eaten fly dung, and let out a snide laugh. "I was wondering why you defended this vampire." Turns out it's just because you have an affair with him. The so-called truth of Catholicism revealed two things. Either it's the birth of the chosen one, or it's an extremely dangerous approach. Clearly, the truth is we must kill him. This guy even killed his own police colleagues. Cecilia hysterically laughed madly. No matter how hard Kim Soo-hyuk tried to argue, it was useless. Cecilia, determined to kill him, didn't intend to give him a chance to speak. Kim Soo-hyuk remained silent. But the killing intent in his blood-red pupils grew stronger. In a dark room somewhere, Coco slowly opened her eyes. In front of her was a cage. The light shining through the cracks of the door woke her up. How long had it been since she last fed? A day? A week? Her stomach involuntarily growled. At this moment, she had only one thought in her mind. I need to drink blood. Meanwhile, Mirror was vigorously defending Kim Soo-hyuk at the meeting, trying to erase his massacre of his colleagues. However, Cecilia, citing the violation of the will of the ancient ancestors, firmly refused to make any concessions. This time, Mirror completely agreed with her viewpoint. But to completely eliminate vampires, we must eradicate the female demon Anna and her minions. Besides Kim Soo-hyuk, who else could lure those vampires into the trap? The long-established Vatican was founded by St. Peter 2,000 years ago, with countless Vatican warriors fighting one after another. Of the ancient creation vampires, only one person survived. And that is Anna. She is very cunning, mostly hiding in the dark, only revealing her vicious fangs when facing Vatican followers. But overnight, those vampires hiding in the shadows began to appear openly. And all of this was thanks to Kim Soo-hyuk's appearance. In the subsequent series of battles, the leader of Anna's group, Ayaka, was killed. The leader of the sixth group, Coco, was defeated and betrayed, joining the Vatican organization. Things that had stagnated for a long time were now rapidly progressing because of this man's appearance. Now is the best time to solve this battle that has lasted for over 2,000 years. And also the opportunity for all of you to make history. Cecilia couldn't listen anymore. She scoffed at Mirror's viewpoint. Moreover, that so-called sixth group leader Coco was still acting insane. She demanded Helena strip Mirror of his captaincy and immediately killed the two vampires. But while Helena thought this viewpoint was nonsense, it was worth a try. It was because of this man's appearance that the once invincible Anna had exposed a weakness for the first time. Helena planned to turn them into an experimental force. However, due to the need for legalization considerations, more than half of the bishops would need to vote in favor for it to pass. And the bishops supporting it would need to take responsibility for managing the vampires. The outcome of the meeting was already expected by Mirror, but Cecilia remained unsettled about it. Even if, hypothetically, she could accept Kim Soo-hyuk, Coco, however, would be Anna's lackey, and that was something she absolutely couldn't accept. Helena had also heard about Coco's low intelligence, and how difficult she was to control. She was determined to personally evaluate her. But at that moment, a more troublesome situation arose. Just as Helena had ordered Coco to be brought in, the priests were shocked to find that the former leader of Anna's sixth group, Coco, had broken the cage and escaped. She was clearly a vampire hunter who didn't care for anyone. Yet she willingly bathed for the foul-smelling woman, and allowed her to feed on fresh blood every day. All because the woman had already been defiled by Kim Soo-hyuk. She would do everything to help him join the Vatican organization. However, Coco's naked escape cast a shadow over everything. If she revealed her true nature and started slaughtering the children, then Kim Soo-hyuk would immediately be cast into an abyss from which there would be no return. No one knew when, but Coco had somehow dug a large hole out of the specially designed strong iron cage and escaped. The bishops who were about to accept them suddenly furrowed their brows. The only one supporting Kim Soo-hyuk, Mirror, found his position very passive. Facing Cecilia's furious yelling, Mirror could no longer argue. Luckily, it was still daytime, so vampires couldn't fully utilize their true strength. But the quick-witted Dominic thought of something. The darkest part of the entire building was the basement. If Coco escapes from there, it will trigger a catastrophe. Besides, the most likely place for Coco to hide is the orphanage dormitory. It was nap time. The room with the curtains drawn was dimly lit. The boy, taking a nap, was woken up by a full bladder. When he pushed open the door to the room, he was shocked to see the leader of the sixth group standing in front of him. Coco! The thought of the children being at risk at any moment made Dominic anxious, like an ant on a hot pan. But the woman beside him calmly told him to shut up. Then she seemed to be controlled, emitting dazzling holy light, repeating something under her breath. Kim Soo-hyuk had recognized something different about this woman early on. Even the atmosphere surrounding her seemed to have changed more. No matter how Dominic tried to persuade her, she seemed possessed, ignoring everything around her. If she didn't control her emotions, the consequences would be unmanageable. However, all forms of persuasion were ineffective. The concern for the children had turned into anger. Suddenly, a massive magical array emitting dazzling light formed in the hall. At Kim Soo-hyuk's loud shout, everyone naturally prepared for defense. But the danger happened to appear in Mirror's direction. In the light array, a giant sword suddenly shot out, splitting the very spot where she stood in half. Lucia anxiously called her name through the smoke, but Helena was the first to save her life. She blocked the giant sword with one hand, saving Mirror from disaster. But her arm had been slashed open during the attack. Blood poured from her hand. Lucia anxiously called their names. Fortunately, they soon responded. It seemed safety was guaranteed. Helena immediately began to arrange troops. The first task was to send Lucia to check the situation at the orphanage. Meanwhile, Dominic was ordered to stay behind, because he was reliable within the church. His main task was to take care of the recently out-of-control Bishop Hilder. After everything was arranged, everyone immediately headed for the orphanage. If Coco caused any harm in the orphanage, Helena would strictly hold Mirror responsible. Aware of the serious responsibility, Mirror had no choice but to obediently agree. The muscular woman, however, watched her with a hawk's eye. All of this had actually been foreseen. Cecilia and the others rushed toward the orphanage. After all, Coco was a trusted member of Anna's group. How could it be so easy to turn from evil to good? Lucia, what are you doing? Lucia, ahead of them, stood dazed at the doorway. Was there some kind of sudden situation? A terrifying image of children's corpses filled her mind. Cecilia, her anger rising, rushed forward and shouted at Lucia. But the scene before her made her jaw drop. Coco had bent over, lying on the ground, and a child was actually riding on her back, playing. The children innocently told her, "If you want to play, you have to wait in line." The sight left Cecilia embarrassed. Is this really the vampire leader? Mirror, who arrived in a hurry, loudly reprimanded Coco's behavior. However, Coco's bleeding arm suddenly caught the woman's attention. Coco, who hadn't fed in a long time, smelled the blood and became ravenous. In an instant, she dashed out from the group of children. "Please, I just want to lick a little." Mirror desperately tried to block her, but she couldn't possibly resist her. "Humph, you cunning, greedy fox. You've finally revealed your true vampire nature." Yet, Cecilia raised her hand with the demon-repelling flames, and slowly walked toward Coco. But at this moment, Coco spoke. "What the hell is your problem? Kim Suak won't let me drink anyone else's blood. Only yours. Do you want me to starve to death?" This time, it was Cecilia's turn to be shocked. Had they really tamed this beast? The vicious vampire before them could suppress the urge inside her just because of a man's words. Isn't this a form of redemption? It takes time. Dominic took the chance to grab her wrist and persuaded her to retract her magical power. The previously rampaging Hilda finally returned to normal. She rushed to the scene in a hurry. The children were thrilled to see her. They kept greeting her, having grown up with them since childhood. Hilda cared deeply about the safety of these orphans. She had long considered them her own children. However, upon hearing from them directly, Coco, the vampire, had played with the children for an entire afternoon, without any inappropriate actions. She even let the children ride on her back pretending she was a horse. And they all played a game of sliding down the slide together. The reality before her was completely different from what Hilda had imagined. The next moment, her eyes filled with tears. Hilda called out loudly, rushing toward Mirror. She apologized to Mirror with a big hug for accidentally hurting her. For an unintentional act of harm, Mirror naturally didn't reproach her. She simply smiled and forgave her. At that moment, her gaze coincidentally met Coco's. "Thank you for playing with the children. I misjudged you." Even so, Coco, who had disobeyed and tried to escape, still received a big slap from Mirror. After a false alarm, the outcome of the meeting was soon revealed. The two vampires could be controlled by humans, and were allowed to join the Vantafeng Church. With the consent of most of the bishops, they would be assigned to a combat unit and placed in a squad. Even Cecilia, who was full of hostility toward Kim Suak, expressed her support. Helena seemed quite satisfied with this outcome. She immediately announced the release of their handcuffs and shackles. Kim Suak and Coco would be placed together as members of the Special Operations Team, organized by Mirror. They would stir up a wave to oppose Anna.